Chapter 1624. Yes, I'll go back to the palace now. Cui Xiu quickly bowed and then stepped out of the small courtyard. After leaving the small courtyard, she suddenly looked back and said in her heart, "When you were sleeping with me, you were so anxious. Now that you're done, you want me to go back and serve others. Jianghu, you're just like this. Just wait until my master is promoted. At that time, I will definitely trample you under my feet and see your face." With a trace of anger, Cui Xiu returned to the palace and went to the 8th madame's bedroom. Along the way, the maids who saw her hurriedly saluted, which made her involuntarily raise her head. No matter what, she was half the master here, which gave her a sense of superiority. Until she walked into the bedroom, she saw Junko sitting in front of the mirror and dressing up. In particular, she noticed that Junko's mental state was very good, and she seemed to have a smile on her face. This made Cui Xiu even more puzzled. She could only snort and turn around to find a room to catch up on her sleep. Here Cui Xiu was half the master. No one could control what she wanted to do. What Cui Xiu didn't know was that as soon as she left, Yang Lu came to Yang Wu's small courtyard. As Yang Qindong's servants, after the young master returned, they had to go together to greet him and wait for orders. There were only 5 of them in the Yang family. Even if Tiger's Mane was included, there were only 6 people. It was because they were talented that they showed their noble status. But this kind of nobility was only in front of others. In front of Yang Qindong they were still servants. "You're here, then let's go." Yang Wu saw Yang Lu appear and smiled. "Let's go, 5th brother." Yang Lu also smiled. But what he didn't notice was the forced and painful smile in Yang Wu's eyes. As the guard of Crimson City, Yang Wu naturally had his strengths to be chosen here. Although no one said anything, he had a bad feeling about this. Yang Qindong woke up early in the morning and had breakfast in Hu Yan's princess consort's palace. He even held little Yang Lin and fed her a few mouthfuls of food before leaving with a satisfied laugh. When he saw that Beta Persei, Yang Wu and Yang Lu were already standing in the courtyard waiting for him, he waved his hand. "Let's go to the city lord's mansion." The so-called city lord's mansion had already become a 9-story building. However, the real office space was only on the bottom 8 floors. The 9th floor was reserved for Yang Qindong. This was what the ancients called the 9 and 5 supremes. Not everyone could use the 9th floor. Outside the city lord's mansion, Yu Qian, who had already received the news, was waiting here with Luan Shaoqian and the others. Each of them had a look of anticipation on their faces. Because according to the past habit, every time the 6th young master appeared here, he would give very important pointers. Often, after these pointers became reality, the strength of the entire Yangxia would unknowingly rise to a new level. Everyone was waiting for Yang Qindong to appear and for his new instructions. This time, Yang Qindong did indeed have new instructions, and that was to establish a cabinet. Yangxia was getting stronger and stronger, his territory was getting bigger and bigger, and there were more and more things to do. It was already insufficient to rely on the city lord's mansion to solve all the problems, so the cabinet came into being. They would help share some of the important things and make important decisions. Unlike the cabinet system of the great Ming dynasty, Yangxia's cabinet had a total of 9 people. Usually, everyone was in charge of something. Once there was a problem that could not be solved, the 9 people would vote according to the principle of the minority obeying the majority to make the final decision. If there was an abstention vote and the result was an equal vote, then Yang Qindong would make the decision. Most of the time, Yang Qindong would not interfere too much with the cabinet's affairs. In order to avoid a situation where the cabinet had too much control, the management of the military was not within the scope of internal discussion. The military was independent and even the logistics were the same. This was the only way to ensure that even if the cabinet was controlled by someone else in the future, the military would still be in the hands of the royal family. This would ensure that the royal family could turn the situation around, and it would be as easy as flipping a hand. Yang Qindong sat in the large conference room of the city lord's mansion. When he announced this decision face to face, the officials below were silent. Many of them showed excitement in their eyes. In fact, this was understandable. When Yang Qindong was not there, the final decision of Yangxia's affairs was in the hands of the city lord's mansion, which was equivalent to being in the hands of the city lord. Yu Qian was worthy of being the boss. However, because this person was wholeheartedly impartial and never showed favoritism, there were many things that people wanted to intervene in, but they could not have the right to speak. Now, the cabinet system was implemented, which was equivalent to decentralizing the power in Yu Qian's hands. So, they had more opportunities to intervene in government affairs. Of course, everyone was happy. Now, these people were thinking about who would be the first batch of people to enter the cabinet. Naturally, the low-ranking people did not think much about it, but they hoped that the officials they were familiar with could enter the cabinet. This was equivalent to having a strong backer. Among the people present, the one who was most disappointed was Luan Xiaoqun. As the first deputy city lord, he was going to take over from city lord Yu Qian, but now that the cabinet system was introduced, his power would be greatly dispersed. For a moment, Luan Xiaoqun couldn't help but think of his private statement on the matter of the 8th madam. Was it because of this that it provoked the dissatisfaction of the 6th young master so the cabinet system was introduced? This was Luan Xiaoqun's thinking too much. Yang Qindong had thought about the cabinet system for a long time. He was using the political system of later generations as a reference. And now he thought that the time was ripe to establish a cabinet. As for the previous system of the city lord's mansion, it was because Yu Qian was the city lord. Yang Qindong was very assured of this person's ability and integrity. But now it was different. Yu Qian was old and could not do everything by himself. Wan Xiaoli was too young and could be easily used by people with ulterior motives. Now was the time to introduce the cabinet system. Not only that, the appearance of the cabinet system was also a great advantage for the next conquest of the North and South Ming dynasty. It was because of this that today's meeting was held. Not to mention that Luan Xiaoqun was a little disappointed. Yu Qian, on the other hand, was indifferent. Yu Qian was a person with a high evaluation in history. There was a natural reason for that. This was a person who truly cared about the people. In his opinion, as long as the people lived a prosperous life, it was the top priority. As for whether he would offend anyone in the process, it was not a problem that he needed to consider. Now, the emergence of the cabinet system represented a more mature sign of Yang Xie. How could he refuse? Not to mention that he also knew that he was old and could not stay in the position of the city lord's mansion for long, so naturally, there was no sense of loss. Then again, no matter what the people below thought, this matter was decided by Yang Qindong, so it was useless for others to doubt it. This was not a democratic era, but a period of imperial power. As the king and founder of the Yang faction, as long as Yang Qindong decided on something, the others would have to obey his orders. Well, next I will announce the first batch of people to join the cabinet. Seeing that the discussion below gradually became quiet, Yang Qindong reached out and took a piece of paper with a list of names recorded on it. In an instant, the meeting became quiet. At this moment, it was most appropriate to describe it as a pin-drop silence. In the quiet big conference room, only Yang Qindong's unusually calm voice sounded. Cabinet Leader Yu Qian. The first name was read out, but it did not cause any waves because everyone thought that this was a normal thing. Next, Yang Qindong paused and continued to read, Luan Xiaoqun. Luan Xiaoqun, who was sitting there and still a little nervous, couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief after hearing his name. He was really a little nervous because he was worried that his previous actions had caused the dissatisfaction of the 6th young master. If so, even if he was not a cabinet member, it was normal. If that was the case, it meant that he was completely removed from the ranks of the high-level cadres. The appearance of Luan Xiaoqun's name did not cause any surprise. After all, everyone could see it. Bugnam of Gojoseon has been deliberately training his brother-in-law. In addition, he was the first deputy city lord, the first person after Yu Qian. It was normal for him to appear on the list. After Luan Xiaoqun, Yang Qindong opened his mouth and read out the third name. Shenyu. As soon as this name came out, it was no longer quiet. There were more or less whispers and discussions. Shenyu, chief of the supervision department. In the many years since he took office, he has made contributions, but they were not very big. The main thing was that he had enough qualifications. This person joined the Yang Xie with Yu Qian. It has been more than 10 years. It was precisely because of his seniority that although the people below had some discussions, no one would say anything more. On the contrary, Shenyu himself was very excited at this moment. After his name was called, he got up and walked straight to the rostrum like Yu Qian and Luan Xiaoqun. Shenyu's age was not young. He was only 3 years younger than Yu Qian. But who says that you don't have ambition when you're old? It was good to be able to exert their remaining energy. Presumably, it was not only Shenyu who thought this way. Many old chiefs of various departments would also think this way. Even in the present day, this kind of thinking was still mainstream. After Shenyu, Yang Qindong called out Wu Qian's name. Wu Qian, chief of the anti-corruption department. His name and his name could be said to complement each other. Wu Qian really had no money. Moreover, this person was impartial, as if Bao Gong had been reborn. For the sake of his work, he even sent his wife and assistant to prison. Such a person was like an insurmountable mountain to those officials who had ulterior motives. His addition to the cabinet also made many people's hearts ache. With this point they had to put away any ulterior motives they had before. Chapter 1625. Wu Qian, whose name was called, didn't have any excitement. He stood up indifferently. As far as he was concerned, whether he joined the cabinet or not, he would still continue to work. It was just that joining the cabinet meant that Yang Qindong trusted him more, which made him a little excited. Just like Yu Qian, the longer he followed Yang Qindong, the more he saw Yang Xie's rapid changes, and the more he was influenced by Yang Qindong's personality. To be recognized by someone he admired was a happy thing no matter how he looked at it. After Wu Qian, Yang Qindong called the fifth name, Long Tainan. This time the discussion below was even louder and it couldn't be hidden. Long Tainan was just the chief of public security. To put it bluntly, he was just a person who maintained social security. How could he join the cabinet? In terms of qualifications, he was very shallow. Even when he was qualified to be the chief of public security, many people were skeptical. But now he actually became the first batch of members to join the cabinet. This greatly exceeded everyone's expectations. But then everyone remembered that Long Tianan's wife was Bugnam of Gojoseon's seventh sister, and he had nepotism. For a time, everyone was relieved. Some people even thought that if Long Tainan could enter the cabinet with his qualifications, did that mean that they also had a chance? For a time, many chiefs of other departments, even the chiefs of important departments, had a look of expectation on their faces. They hoped that the next person to be called would be them. Long Tainan stood up. At this moment he also had a look of disbelief. It wasn't until he saw Yang Qindong gently nod to him that he knew that everything was true. He immediately took out the style of a soldier and strode straight to the rostrum. In the end, even under the influence of Yang Qindong, Yang Xie had nothing to do with the great Ming in many aspects. But Yang Xie's development time was still too short, and it was inevitable that he would be influenced by Confucianism. In that era where culture was emphasized, it was really something that many people didn't even dare to imagine that a martial artist like Long Tainan would enter the cabinet. If it wasn't for Yang Qindong's words, even if it was announced by City Lord Yu Qian, his subordinates would have objected loudly. It could be said that it was Yang Qindong who had used his influence to decide this matter. After all, without Yang Qindong there wouldn't be Yang Xie today. Without the 5-star army, there wouldn't be such a beautiful life. After reading 5 names in a row, Yang Qindong put down the paper in his hand. Then he glanced at the participants. For a moment, those who were under his gaze couldn't help but straighten their bodies. It was as if they were saying, "Pay attention to me, I'm also very capable." But unfortunately, after looking around, Yang Qindong said, "For the time being, there are only 5 people in the cabinet. As for the other 4, I still need to consider it. But as long as you have the ability, you will have such an opportunity. Not only that, even if the officials of the great Ming dynasty are interested, they will also have such an opportunity." What? This sentence was like throwing a large stone into a calm pool, instantly causing everyone to exclaim in surprise. The officials of the great Ming dynasty can also enter the cabinet? Doesn't this mean that the competition is too strong? Yang Qindong saw this reaction and he was happy. This was the result he wanted. He believed that it wouldn't take long for this matter to spread to the imperial court of the great Ming dynasty, and it would definitely cause a lot of waves. This was the reason why he built the cabinet at this time. It was to dig a big hole for the great Ming dynasty. As long as there were empty seats, he wouldn't have to worry about no one jumping into it. Quiet down. Seeing that everyone was discussing for a while, Yang Qindong reached out and pressed down. Suddenly there was silence. It's still the same sentence. As long as everyone has the ability, you don't have to worry about not being discovered. Everyone will have a chance to enter the cabinet because the members of the cabinet will change every 3 to 5 years if there are no major accidents. There will be newcomers and there will also be people who leave. 3 to 5 years. This was what Yang Qindong decided after thinking for a long time. If it wasn't fixed, it would only show how terrifying the authority of the king was. This way he wouldn't have to worry about the people below fighting for power or playing tricks with him. In fact, if one looked carefully at the 5 people who were chosen, there were a lot of things to pay attention to. Needless to say, if Yu Qian didn't enter the cabinet, the others wouldn't have the qualifications to enter the cabinet. Letting him become the head of the cabinet was also a kind of affirmation of his previous work. When he was old, he would naturally retire. At that time, it would be the time for his son to take over the position. The son would inherit the father's business and have 2 cabinet elders. This was enough glory. There were also Xinyu and Wu Qian. One was the chief of the Ministry of Supervision and the other was the chief of the Ministry of Anti-Corruption. This was enough to show the importance that Yang Qindong attached to the supervision of officials. Presumably, if these two people joined the cabinet who would dare to interfere, they would definitely be severely punished. Moreover, because Yu Qian and Xin Yu were officials from the Great Ming dynasty, not only were they used for more than 10 years, but they also entered the cabinet. With this, it was equivalent to giving the other officials of the Great Ming dynasty a lesson. Once the five-star army arrived at the city gates, they would know what to do. As for the last two, Luan Shaoqian and Long Tainan, one was his uncle and the other was his brother-in-law. They were equivalent to family. When they were there, when the cabinet made decisions, it would definitely be based on Yang Qindong's will. At least, it would not be out of control. In particular, when Long Tainan entered the cabinet, it also proved that Yang Xie's focus was beginning to lean towards the side of local law and order. With the continuous creation of new areas, how to manage them became the most important thing. The above were Yang Qindong's considerations. All aspects could be considered to have been taken care of. After the meeting, except for the 5 members of the cabinet, everyone else left. After there were no outsiders, Yang Qindong first congratulated the 5 people one by one. Then he said, 5 cabinet elders, now that Yang Xie is growing stronger, the pressure and responsibility on you is also increasing. Not only do you have to take care of the things in your hands, but you also need to look further. For example, the South Ming Baiming, and the West where the Navy is fighting. Since you are now cabinet elders, the power in your hands is many times greater than before. Every time you make a decision you have to be very careful. You have to consider all kinds of problems and things. Not to say that you can't make any mistakes, but you have to strive for perfection. Yes. Including Yu Qian, the 5 of them all respectfully replied, yes. Good, since everyone is now cabinet elders, then I still have to give you more responsibilities on top of your original work. For the public, now that the conquest of the Great Ming has begun, it would be best if we can peacefully accept it. For the public, the Great Ming is also a place where people know each other. This matter will require you and Xingong to worry about. If there are old friends who contact you, use them if you can. If you can't, you can also appease them. Not long after, perhaps the South Ming will send a delegation to Chichen City to study. At that time I will have to trouble the 2 cabinet elders. Yu Qian and Xin Yu went to receive the officials of the Great Ming. This was the most appropriate thing to do. With them as an example, the officials of the Great Ming would know what to choose in their hearts. Yes, my king. Yu Qian and Xin Yu agreed without hesitation. This was originally something that they should do. Yang Qindong nodded in satisfaction. Then he turned his gaze to Wu Qian and said, Wu Qian, Yang Xie's territory is getting bigger and bigger, and the officials needed are also getting bigger and bigger. When there are more people, it is inevitable that there will be all kinds of people. In terms of personal integrity, I still need Wu Qian to help me check. This king will still say the same thing. If something happens, investigate it. No matter who they are, who their backer is, or how big their background is, as long as they violate the law, just do whatever you want. There is also the issue of the official's property. Whoever doesn't cooperate will no longer be an official. If you want to make a name for yourself, you want to reap benefits, and you want to have power, all the good things in the world can be yours. Good, this official will remember the king's words. Wu Qian revealed a rare smile. He also felt that the pace of Yang Xie's expansion was a bit fast, and there were already signs of problems among the officials. He was thinking about whether he should make a heavy hand to clean up the officials. Now Yang Qindong gave him an imperial sword. Especially when the property disclosure policy came out, if someone's family had more money than their original income, it would be clear at a glance. If they couldn't clearly state the source of the property, it would be easier to deal with it. So, in addition to his identity as a cabinet elder, there shouldn't be any big problems when it comes to work. Cabinet Elder Long, the problem of public security is the fundamental problem of a country. As long as the country is well governed, the people can put all their energy into building the country. Therefore, the public security headquarters should not only increase the intensity of patrolling, but also send outstanding cadres to some of the new Yang Xie's territories to do in-depth ideological work with the people. Let them check each other and expose the people who have problems. They should strive to strangle the crimes in the cradle so that the losses can be reduced. Also, there are bandits and anti-Yang Xie forces in some places. Don't be polite to these people. Contact the local garrison and make a thorough plan to eliminate them in one fell swoop. Don't be soft-hearted. Understood, 6th young master, please rest assured. Long Tainan put down the pen in his hand, stood up, and straightened his body. Finally, it was Luan Shaoqian's turn. Yang Qindong handed over the work of propaganda and education to him. Remember, propaganda is very important, especially in an era where people follow the herd. If this work is done well, it can make the society more stable and the people more motivated. Otherwise, there will be a lot of chaos. There is also the issue of education. You must build more schools, and the Han people must learn to read. Let them know what is loyalty and what is treachery, and better distinguish between right and wrong. Write a report on how much money you need later. Okay, sixth young master, I will go back and have a good talk with the people from the publicity department and the education department. I will definitely do this well. Yuan Shaochen also quickly expressed his attitude. Yuan Shaochen was also very satisfied with managing these two major tasks. This proved that his words still had a lot of weight and Yang Qindong still thought highly of him. When it came to work, he didn't have any worries. Brothers, Longzi's new book, Duke Ferocious, is already a little fat. You can go and slaughter it. New book, Duke Ferocious, please recommend, bookmark, click. During the new book period, please support Longzi, thanks. Chapter 1626. With the establishment of a cabinet and the appointment of 5 elders, the news quickly spread throughout the streets of Chichen City. After Yang Qindong listened to some work reports in the city lord's mansion, he left and returned to the palace. Because of Yang Qindong's return to the palace, Yang Lu had some free time and returned to his residence in Chichen City. The moment he entered the residence, the housekeeper Yang Ying welcomed him. Master, you've had a hard day. It's all right. Yang Lu forced a smile and said darkly, if there's anything, let's talk in the secret room. Very quickly, Yang Lu sat on a familiar chair in the secret room, drinking tea and listening to Yang Ying's report. Master, old Yuan has sent a message. He said that we are going to check his accounts. He is very nervous and asked when we will take action. I'm afraid he won't be able to hold on for long. After Yang Lu sat down, Yang Ying told him the news he had just received. He has the guts to take the money but doesn't have the guts to face the questioning? He's really a piece of trash. I shouldn't have worked with him. Yang Lu said. Yang Ying also nodded in agreement, but he still continued, it's just that old Yuan knows too much, he can't get off the ship now. He also said. What did he say? Yang Lu asked unhappily. He also said that he has evidence of us. If we don't save him, we'll just die together. Yang Ying thought for a while and gritted his teeth. How dare he? As if someone had stepped on his tail, Yang Lu jumped up all of a sudden. He never thought that there would be a day when he would be threatened. Then send someone to kill him. But if he really has evidence, he must have a backup plan. If he dies, I'm afraid our matter will be exposed. Yang Ying replied worriedly. Yang Lu's originally annoyed expression immediately disappeared. That's right, how could someone like old Yuan not have a backup plan? If he really wanted to have a falling out, the other party would definitely die, and he probably wouldn't be able to escape. After pondering for a moment, Yang Lu sighed and said, then let's keep him alive for now. Send someone to tell White Fox to keep this Yuan guy in check. It won't be too late to deal with him after the dust has settled on our side. The White Fox that Yang Lu was talking about was the CIA's director in charge of the southern Ming area. As mentioned before, the CIA was organized by Yang Qindong's 7th wife, Su Mana. At first he just wanted to give it a try. After all the information came from the Security Bureau. Not only could there be problems, but it was also incomplete. Since ancient times, the way of checks and balances had always been one of the methods that the Wuxia emperors had been most willing to use. As such, the CIA took advantage of the situation to rise. Moreover, because of the creator, Su Maner, the management of the CIA was dominated by women. This was to distinguish them from the Security Bureau and also to fill in the gaps. After all, most of the time, women's hearts were more meticulous, and they would do things more comprehensively. Because of this, Yang Xia's sources of information had always been very accurate. The final judgment would only be made after the final report from the Comprehensive Security Bureau and the CIA. For example, when Yang Lu was sent to Southern Ming to manage the intelligence work of the Security Bureau, he naturally couldn't avoid dealing with White Fox. The ambitious Yang Lu's first thought was to get rid of the White Fox, and it was not difficult to do so. The CIA was only good at gathering information, but in terms of hands-on ability, or in other words, operational strength, they were far from the CIA. But then, Yang Lu considered that even if he killed White Fox, the CIA would send more people. Perhaps Black Fox and Flower Fox would be involved as well. In the end, he gave up on the idea of killing White Fox and changed it to temptation. To be more specific, it was temptation. Yang Lu used himself as bait and put on a posture of pursuing White Fox. It didn't take long for him to successfully turn her into one of his own. Who was Yang Lu? He was one of the 5 servants around Yang Qindong. His hidden power was so great that few people in Yangxia could compare. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that as long as these family retainers didn't commit a crime of rebellion, even if they made a mistake, their lives wouldn't be in danger. This was because the other family retainers wouldn't watch their good brothers get killed. In other words, Yang Lu was a big tree. Once you relied on him, it was equivalent to having no worries for the rest of your life. White Fox was a woman and she would grow old. Now she was in a high position, but one day she would retire because of age. There had to be a place for her to go. Yang Lu was undoubtedly the best backer and candidate in her eyes, and the two could be said to hit it off. After sleeping with White Fox, Yang Lu revealed his ambition little by little. At first it scared White Fox, but she was already on the boat and now she couldn't get off. Moreover, God knew if Yang Lu would be in trouble if she exposed the matter. But one thing was for sure, and that was that she would definitely be in trouble. She couldn't compare to Yang Lu's brothers who had gone through life and death to plead for him. In the end, White Fox also became one of Yang Lu's subordinates. After the Security Bureau and the CIA were under his control, Yang Lu didn't have any scruples when doing things in southern Ming. Soon he colluded with the local tycoon Yuan Qian, who was the old Yuan they just mentioned, and started a smuggling business. The goods produced by Yangxia every year were extremely popular. Many merchants hated that they received too little, or else they would have earned more. Yuan Qian was one of them. Among the merchants, Yuan Qian wasn't the most powerful, but he was sufficiently obedient. He became Yang Lu's spokesperson. With Yang Lu's name, it was naturally not a problem for him to obtain more goods from Crimson City. As such, the Yuan clan stood out from the crowd of merchants, and he would only receive 10% of the profits. The remaining 90% would go to Yang Lu. Again, Yang Lu's plan was huge. He needed a lot of money and he needed to bribe a lot of people to do things for him. Slowly, he took away 5% of Yuan Qian's profits, leaving him with only 5% of the profits. Logically speaking, this wasn't a small amount. However, the problem was that everyone knew that Yuan Qian had connections, and many poor relatives came knocking on his door. In order to not lose face in front of others, Yuan Qian could only puff himself up at his own cost. Slowly, many officials in southern Ming had their eyes on him, and the amount they wanted was not a small amount. Yuan Qian finally couldn't take it anymore. Thinking of the things he had done for Yang Lu, he demanded an exorbitant price. Not only did he want back the 5% that was taken away from him, he also wanted an additional 10%, which was a total of 20% of the profits. How could Yang Lu agree to this? The conflict between the two sides started to appear, and this was what Yang Ying reported. Yang Lu was quite relieved to leave the matter to White Fox. Not only did this woman have good looks, but she was also very capable. Otherwise, she wouldn't have become the director of the CIA in southern Ming. He was just a small merchant and he was confident that he could control him. Yang Lu also knew that there was a problem and he couldn't avoid it forever, so he had to hurry up. He couldn't help but look at Yang Ying and said, "Go to Fourth Master Yang Yang's place and tell him this." Yang Lu returned to Crimson City and started to get busy. Establishing the cabinet was just one of the countless things he had to do. Next, he went to the People's Hero Monument and brought the 5 cabinet members to pay their respects. This was also the first time the 5 cabinet members made a public appearance, and it was to tell everyone that the cabinet was important and had great power. Next, Yang Qindong started to patrol the factories one by one. In terms of professional ability, Yang Qindong naturally couldn't compare to professionals. However, he had foresight and knowledge that exceeded this world by a few hundred years. Therefore he either didn't speak, or he could often add the finishing touch, making people feel enlightened. Crimson City was huge and there were many factories. If Yang Qindong wanted to visit all the large factories and departments, it would take a few months. During this time, the negotiations between Yangxia and southern Ming finally came to a conclusion. Facing the covetous eyes of the 5-star army, southern Ming, who wasn't prepared, finally chose to compromise. After Ma Dali and Xie Chong quarreled and argued, all the way until the 10th month of 1467. After more than 3 months of negotiations, southern Ming finally made a lot of concessions. For example, they allowed Yangxia to open a bank in southern Ming, open a shop, and allow him to build a port in Fuzhou and other places near the sea. Ma Dali also represented Bugnam of Gojoseon and said that Yangxia and southern Ming would continue to be friends for generations. In the future, Yangxia would continue to provide food to southern Ming, and the price wouldn't increase by 50%, but only by 20%, etc. Just like that, the relationship between the two sides went from being at daggers drawn to the current ambiguous relationship. This was really unexpected. After Ma Dali finished the final negotiations, he took a ship back to Crimson City and reported to Yang Qindong. In the political affairs hall of the palace, Yang Qindong said that he had worked hard and that things were done well. This made Ma Dali smile. As if he could see that Yang Qindong was in a good mood, Ma Dali took the opportunity to ask his question. Sixth young master, the current situation is that our Yangxia is very strong, and the 5-star army has recovered their fighting strength after 3 months of rest. Why do you still want to negotiate with Southern Ming? Ma Dali wasn't the only one who wanted to ask this question. Many officials were also filled with doubts. This was because according to Yang Qindong's style of doing things, he had never negotiated with other countries, regions, or powers. If there was a disagreement, he would start a war. Sometimes he didn't even need an excuse. Yang Qindong knew that it was time to answer this question. Even if he didn't give an answer today, there would still be people who would ask tomorrow. In order to solve the problem once and for all, he said, war stems from politics and politics is higher than war. Whether a war can be won or not, it can't be measured purely from a military perspective. It also needs to be combined with political factors. Chapter 1627. For example, let's attack the Southern Ming Empire. We can definitely win, but how much will we have to pay? You have to know that in the eyes of many Han people, the Great Ming Empire is still orthodox. Even if they are divided into the Northern and Southern Ming Empires, it is still the same. If the people do not lose their minds, it is not wise to attack rashly. Furthermore, if we take over the Southern Ming Empire by force, not to mention what kind of resistance we will encounter, the Southern Ming Empire will not give up easily. Their destructive power is obvious. As such, if we want to recover and rebuild, we will need to invest a large amount of manpower and resources. As for these, we are not ready yet. This is also the reason why we are negotiating first. Yang Qindong answered Ma Dali's question seriously this time. This caused the other party to continuously nod his head, as if he had thought of something. Sixth young master, in other words, negotiations are only a method. In the end, we might use force? It is not a possibility, but we will definitely use force. Some people are like this. If you only show off your muscles, they will not be afraid and will think that it is just for show. As long as you place a large blade on their neck and let them feel the coldness, they will truly be afraid and lower their heads. Thus, once the Yangxia has made all the preparations and has enough reasons to convince the world, they will make their move. Speaking to here, Yang Qindong's eyes flashed with a complicated expression, but he quickly became firm again. As for the reasons needed, someone should be sending it to us soon. Ma Dali naturally did not understand the deeper meaning of Yang Qindong's words. As a qualified official, he had to know what he should know and what he should not inquire about. Otherwise, he would only bring trouble to himself. Yes, sixth young master, this official understands. That's right, before Minister Xiechong left, he said that the Southern Ming Empire's observation team will soon arrive at Crimson City. Do you think this is a method to attack them? Of course. Yang Qindong nodded and gave an affirmative answer. This observation group will be led by your Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You must entertain them well. They are the best propaganda tool. When they return to the Southern Ming dynasty, they will definitely bring us many unexpected surprises. Yang Qindong grew up in the 80s and 90s, and there was a very popular saying that the moon in foreign countries was rounder than in China. Just because of this slogan, who knew how many capable and talented people racked their brains to go abroad? Even if it was to wash dishes or do small jobs there, they were unwilling to return to their motherland. This time, in the eyes of many people in the Southern Ming Empire, Crimson City was a foreign country. It was believed that the saying that the moon in Crimson City was rounder than the moon in the Southern Ming Empire would soon become popular. There's an old saying that goes, guarding the mouths of the people is more dangerous than guarding the rivers. As long as this observation group dared to come, Yang Qindong would let this observation group become Yangxia's lobbyists in the Southern Ming dynasty. At that time, the news would spread from 1 to 10, and from 10 to 100, and from 100 to 1,000. There would be a huge problem within the Southern Ming Empire, and this would be the best support for the next attack against the Southern Ming Empire. Just as Yang Qindong and Ma Dali were discussing the matter of the observation group. In the capital of the Southern Ming Empire, Xiechong had also rushed back, covered in dust. In the palace hall, Xiechong handed up a memorial. It was the final result of the negotiations with Ma Dali. Although there were many humiliating terms in it that could be said to be humiliating, at least the 5-star army was cut off. For the Southern Ming Empire, this was already considered a good result. Of course, these terms were not equal, and Zhu Qizhen was not foolish enough to make it public. That would be slapping himself and his officials' faces. Thus, after he received the memorial, he changed the topic. My beloved officials, Wuxia has only been developing for a little more than 10 years. However, they have such powerful strength. Why is that? This time, without waiting for Zhu Qixin to call out names, the officials below automatically stood up. The person leading them was the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhua. This person was also old and wanted to retire, but in the end he was urged to stay by Zhu Qixin. It was not because of anything else, but because there was no one more suitable for this position in the southern Ming Empire than Wang Zhua. Money and provisions were important, and it was not reassuring to leave it to others. Wang Zhua stood up and replied, Your Majesty, this subject has always heard that Yangxia's Crimson City's commerce and industry are very developed. It is because of this that they were able to earn a large amount of money in a very short period of time. This must be the foundation of Yangxia's strength. That's right. Although Zhu Qixin did not want this result, he had to admit that this result was very correct. Thus he nodded. Minister Wang's words are very true. Yangxia's strength is greater than theirs. They have a strong foundation of money, and their financial resources are very sufficient. This is the reason why they were able to establish such a powerful army. Here comes the problem. What they can do, we can do as well. This time, Minister Xie put in a lot of effort to help us get an observation team. This emperor thinks that we should all go to Crimson City and take a look. We can learn from the enemy and subdue them. Zhu Qixin credited the matter of the observation group to Xie Chong. In fact, it was Yang Qindong who suggested it. This was the emperor's power play. If it was Yang Qindong who invited everyone, they would only be grateful to Yang Qindong. But if Zhu Qixin said that he fought for it, then everyone would be grateful to him. As soon as he said this, the officials below began to discuss. The officials in this era did not have many exciting lives. If they did, they would just gather together to watch singing and dancing and drink wine. As for climbing mountains and swimming, only those officials who were not successful could do that. Just like today's officials in the main hall, which one of them did not prepare for court at the 5th watch and enter court at the 6th watch? They woke up so early every day and some of them did not even have enough time to sleep, yet they still wanted to go and take a look. It was beautiful. But now, there was such an opportunity to go out and take a look. It was a trip at public expense. Previously, there was news that Yang Xie would pay for the entire observation group. This was naturally Yang Qindong's own initiative, because he still hoped that these people would become his propagandists and promote Yang Xie's power. Naturally, when Zhu Qixin said this, it was because he wanted Minister Xie Chong to fight for it. Regardless of the reason, to be able to travel at public expense, it was said that Crimson City was very advanced, and there were many good things there, many of which could not be bought in the capital of the southern Ming dynasty. Just based on this point, who would not be willing? For a time, many officials in the imperial court were eager to give it a try. They were all thinking about signing up as soon as possible after the imperial court ended. They did not want to be unable to sign up just because the quota was full. That would be too much of a pity. Zhu Qixin agreed in principle that everyone wanted to go to Crimson City to take a look. Firstly, he wanted to let these people see how Crimson City developed and learn from it. Even if he couldn't learn the essence of it, it would still be beneficial to imitate it and learn it. Secondly, he wanted these officials to feel a sense of urgency. Looking at the development of Crimson City and then looking at themselves, wouldn't they feel guilty? Shouldn't I work hard after coming back? Not only that, Zhu Qixin himself also wanted to go and take a look. Of course, it was only a thought. He did not have the courage. What if he went to Crimson City and was detained? He definitely did not have Yang Qindong's strength and courage to bring 500 black cavalry and rush into southern Cloud Manor, which had tens of thousands of soldiers from 3 provinces. After the court session ended, the officials who went to the Ministry of Rights to register quickly formed a long line. This made the host, Minister Xie Chong, happy but also worried. He was happy because there were so many people going. This made him worry that no one would be interested in going and that the southern Ming dynasty would lose face. However, he was worried because there were too many officials. Would Yang Xie agree? Sir, what should we do? Zhou Xiang came to Xie Chong's side and asked softly. Clearly, this lively scene was far beyond his expectations. How about this? Quickly go to Yang Xie's bank in the capital and see if you can contact Bugnam of Gojoseon through them. Inform them about our situation and ask them how many people they can allow in the observation group. Okay, this official will go now. Zhou Xiang did not dare to delay and ran out of the Ministry of Rights Yamen. Yang Xie's bank in the capital had existed for a long time. This bank had always been in charge of the southern Ming dynasty's grain transfers. As the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights, Zhou Xiang had been here a few times and quickly found this place. He met the manager in charge and explained the situation. The manager was straightforward. He knew that this was a serious matter and hurriedly used the bank's radio station to report to the Crimson City cabinet. Fortunately, he did not have enough authority. Otherwise, he would have directly reported to Bugnam of Gojoseon Palace. Originally, Zhou Xiang thought that it would take a long time to get the news. Unexpectedly, in less than an hour, the manager came out and gave Zhou Xiang 4 big words. There is no limit. When Yang Qindong knew that there were many officials in the southern Ming dynasty, he was overjoyed. Why would he limit the number of people? If all the southern Ming dynasty officials came to Crimson City, he could even force them to stay. This way the southern Ming dynasty would become an empty shell. There would be no need to fight any wars. Of course, this was just a thought. Ingzong Zhu Qizhen would not be so naive. After knowing that there was no limit, Zhou Xiang happily turned and ran. When he returned to the Ministry of Rights Yamen and reported the matter to Minister Xie Chong, he was overjoyed. This was because when Zhou Xiang was away, who knew how many people used their connections to find him and asked for a spot in the observation group. However, he did not know what Bugnam of Gojoseon's bottom line was. However, if he did not agree, he would easily offend people. How could he stand in the imperial court? Chapter 1628. Now, with just one sentence, there was no upper limit and he could explain to all parties. He immediately said to Zhou Xiang and the officials of the Ministry of Rights, "Everyone spread the news, haha." Okay, the officials of the Ministry of Rights replied happily. They were not much better than Xie Chong. After a while, except for Zhou Xiang who was not in his position, everyone else received a lot of messages. They were worried about what to do and now it was all solved. The news quickly spread, and it attracted the unanimous applause of all the officials. Zhu Qizhen also learned of the news. He thought maliciously that he should send more people to eat Yang Qindong dry. However, after thinking about it carefully, he had no choice but to set a rule. That was each department could only transfer 2/3 of their officials into the observation group. He did not want everyone to leave and there would be no one to handle the government affairs of the imperial court. As soon as this decree came out, the various departments quickly began to fight. It was all for the half of the quota. Fighting was the norm for the officials of the great Ming dynasty. Sometimes, when there were benefits, they naturally had to fight. This involved whether they could take the opportunity to develop and become stronger. When there was nothing to do, they also had to fight. They had to show their existence. In short, the great Ming dynasty's officials had many means of fighting, and it was so complicated that outsiders could not imagine. Now that there was such a good thing, there would naturally be a lot of fighting, and there would not be a result in a short time. This lasted for nearly 10 days. In the end, the winners entered the observation group, and the losers stayed in the yamen with a look of despair. The Ministry of Rights quickly received the list of the officials of the observation group from each department. When the result was calculated, it really gave Xie Chong a shock. When he saw the final result, there were more than 3,600 officials. He stood in place as if he had crashed. Xie Chong was very clear that these were the official members of the observation group. According to the result of his negotiation with Ma Dali, each official could bring 3 family members. The usual arrangement was 1 wife and 1 son and 1 daughter. In other words, on the list of 3,600 people, there were 4 times, and there were nearly 15,000 people. Xie Chong couldn't help but chuckle at the thought of so many people eating and drinking. He felt that this time Yang Qindong had smashed his own foot with a stone. Zhu Qizhen also saw this name and couldn't help but chuckle. He then said to Chen Sengbao, "Tell Xie Chong to do it this way." At this moment, Zhu Qizhen was still thinking. This time there were already so many rank 5 officials and above in the capital. If he had known earlier, he would have set the rank of officials to rank 7. That way the number of officials would at least double. This would put a lot of pressure on Yang Xie's finances. But it was just a thought. For officials with too low a rank, even if they went to Crimson City with their ability, the things they could learn would be limited. Besides, 15,000 people was already a lot. The emperor agreed, and the name list of the 15,000-strong observer group was quickly sent to Yang Qindong. At this time he was talking with Yu Qian and Xin Yu about the reception of the observer group. When he saw the final number of people, Yu Qian's face couldn't help but darken. Yu Qian was famous for being upright. Seeing the number of people in the observer group, he began to feel some heartache about the financial expenses. Even Xin Yu's face was ugly and a little red. He was embarrassed for the southern Ming officials. Did they take advantage of the situation? Did they have any shame? On the other hand, Yang Qindong didn't have the slightest displeasure. On the contrary, he was very happy as he muttered to himself, and 15,000 people isn't a lot. I don't know what kind of influence it will have by borrowing their mouths. King, what did you say? Yu Qian and Xin Yu didn't hear clearly and asked curiously. Oh, nothing. This king said that they are all children of the great Han dynasty. We have to properly receive them. As the host, we can't be stingy. Pavilion elders, you can first estimate how much silver is needed to entertain the guests. Yang Qindong waved his hand and asked indifferently. Yu Qian and Xin Yu, who had done some work in advance, had prepared 500,000 taels for this matter. This was already not a small amount. However, they didn't expect the number of people in the observer group to be so large. Just the transport ships sent out were more than 10. After all, they had to leave enough space. They couldn't make it crowded after inviting people. Wouldn't that be contrary to their original intention? That 2 million taels? Xin Yu first glanced at Yu Qian, then carefully probed with a question. However, when he saw Yang Qindong frown, he quickly changed his words. 1,500,000 taels is also fine. If it's any less, I'm afraid we won't be able to reach our initial goal. No, it's not that the difference is too big, but it's too little. Since it was us who took the initiative to invite them over, since we had the intention of letting them advertise our 5-star army, how could we be too petty? How about this? We'll give you 5 million taels as the basic cost. If it's not enough, we'll add more. In addition, we'll give you 370,000 yang coins to ensure that every official will receive 100 yang coins to buy the items they want. The yang dollar was the highest currency in the yang system. There was no other currency that could compare to it. In principle, yang xie coins weren't allowed to be exchanged. There was only one way to obtain them, and that was to receive a certain amount of money from the yang xie officials. Furthermore, those who had made great contributions to yang xie would receive additional rewards. With yang coins, one could purchase the items they wanted from the yang department store in Crimson City. The items here only accepted yang coins. In other words, without yang coins, even if you brought out a mountain of gold or silver, you wouldn't be able to buy anything from there. On the other hand, the items in the yang department store couldn't be seen from the outside. For example, there were the best cosmetics, exquisite watches, practical binoculars, high-class Chinese tunic suits and cheongsams with unique numbers printed on them, as well as high heels for women and shiny leather jackets for men. There were also exquisite palm-sized mirrors decorated with beautiful eyes, mini Buddha statues, Guanyin statues, and so on that could be hung in front of one's chest. There were even more high-end items such as flashlights and sewing machines, bicycles, electric scooters and so on. In short, they were items that didn't have high production capacity or were laborious to produce. These weren't like ordinary mirrors, glass products, soap, perfume, toothpaste and other items that could be casually exported. Instead, they were only sold in the yang department store. Many of the newly developed yang xie products were placed in the yang department store by Yes Hen. They were only waiting for people with yang coins to buy them. Once they had a certain amount of production capacity, they could be exported. Such goods would naturally be taken off the shelves. Because of this, the exchange value of yang coins was very high in the market. Often, 100 taels could be exchanged for 1 yang coin. This was why there was a price but no market. When Yu Qian and Xin Yu heard that Yang Qindong had taken out so many things at once, their eyes widened. They knew that Yang Qindong attached great importance to this matter, but they didn't expect it to be so important that he would take out 370,000 just for yang coins. Every southern Ming official received more than 100 yang coins. It had to be known that even the 2 elders only received 100 yang coins a month after their salary. As for the lower-level officials, they only received a few dozen yang coins. There were even some who received a dozen yang coins a month. This is a big deal. After a round of exclamations, even Yu Qian, who had always treated money like dirt, couldn't help but sigh. Very satisfied with the 2 elders' performance, Yang Qindong chuckled. If that's the case, are the 2 elders confident in completing the task? No problem. Yu Qian and Xin Yu stood up at the same time. At this moment, their hearts were filled with great confidence. Yang Xie had made all kinds of preparations. Under the expectations of the southern Ming officials, 10 modified tourist boats arrived at the Suzhou port not far from Nanjing. Here, nearly 15,000 southern Ming officials were waiting. According to the agreement between the 2 sides, the Suzhou port was being built, but there was still some time before it could be used. To get on the boat, one needed to walk over a ladder, so everyone had to be careful when getting on the boat. They were afraid that they would accidentally step on air and hurt their feet. After everyone boarded the tourist boat, the interior space was spacious and the view was excellent. In particular, one of the guest rooms was equipped with a large Simmons soft mattress, which made it extremely comfortable for people to lie on. At this moment, Wang Jiqing's butt sank into the mattress as he clicked his tongue in wonder. Before this, Wang Jiqing had already seen the world. As the eldest grandson of the Minister of Revenue Wang Zhuo, what kind of good things had he not seen since he was young? Even though he had been to the imperial palace a few times with his grandfather, when he lay on the mattress, he still felt like Granny Lu who had just entered the palace for the first time. Everyone says that Yangxia is very rich and that the progress of society is more civilized and advanced. Could it be that this isn't just a legend? Wang Jiqing said as he lightly stroked the mattress. Bang! The door suddenly opened from the outside. Then a girl around the same age as Wang Jiqing, around 14 or 15 years old, rushed in. As soon as she entered the room she yelled, "Brother, did you go into the bathroom? What are you doing? Don't you know that you have to knock before entering someone's room? You're already so old yet you're still so rude." Although he was scolding her, his words were not harsh. It showed his tolerance and generosity towards the girl in front of him. The girl's name was Wang Shang. She was the granddaughter of Minister Wang Zhuo and Wang Jiqing's sister. Perhaps because they were siblings and they were too familiar with each other, Wang Shang did not take her brother's words seriously. Instead, she continued to chatter, "Brother, did you see the bathroom?" "What bathroom? What is that? Is it a person's name?" Wang Jiqing's face was filled with confusion. Chapter 1629. I knew you hadn't seen it before. Wang Shang snorted. She knew her brother very well. He was very smart and had a lot of ideas, but there was one thing about him. He was too meticulous in doing things. He had a slow personality. She thought that her brother must not have had time to go to the washroom, so she purposely came to show off. "Brother, come here. I'll tell you what the washroom is, what's here and how to use it." Wang Shang pulled Wang Jiqing's hand and led him to the side of the room. After a full 10 minutes, Wang Jiqing walked out of the washroom as if he was in a dream. After showing off, Wang Shang also left the room to find her sisters. Wang Jiqing, who was left behind, was a little confused. The items in the bathroom just now had really shocked him. For example, the expensive shampoo shower gel, the porcelain bathtub that was big enough for him to lie down in, and the toilet that could be flushed at any time. With Wang Jiqing's family background he had experienced these things before, but they were completely different from the things here. Take the bathtub for example. There was a faucet on the side. When you turned it to the left it was cold water. When you turned it to the right it was hot water. It was really very convenient. It was far different from his own home, where he had to boil water in advance to take a bath. When the water turned cold, he had to ask the servants to refill it. It was just a ship that was welcoming them, but the room was already so luxurious. Wang Jiqing couldn't help but wonder what it would be like when they arrived at Yangxia's capital, Qichen City. In fact, Wang Jiqing wasn't the only one with such thoughts. Many people in the same industry had such thoughts. They were looking forward to the rest of the journey. It would take a few more days to get from Suzhou to Qichen City. There were still things happening in Qichen City. For example, a guest was welcomed in the palace. It wasn't exactly a guest. It should be said that it was a member of the family. He was Yang Qindong's fourth brother, Yang Yang. Among the brothers, Yang Yang was the most useless existence in Beiming. When his brothers had things to do, he became a good-for-nothing. He went to restaurants every day to walk birds, giving people the impression that he had nothing to do. In the end, Yang Yang was just born at the wrong time. He still had some ability and insight. This could be seen from the fact that he had condescended to create sixth brother early on. Sure enough, after deciding to follow Yang Qindong, Yang Yang's life changed. She held great power and became Yangxia's spokesperson in the southern Ming dynasty. Not only did she receive the respect of countless people, she could get whatever she wanted with just a stretch of her hand. She truly lived the life of a deity. If he hadn't been assassinated by a ninja, he would still be in the southern Ming Empire and wouldn't be willing to return to Kaisen City. This was not to say that Yang Yang did not like Qiqian City. In terms of facilities, Qiqian City was much better than the capital of the southern Ming dynasty. However, since he was back here, he had to abide by the rules of the southern Ming dynasty. For Yang Yang, who was used to freedom, it was more comfortable in the southern Ming dynasty. He could do whatever he wanted. It had been a while since Yang Qindong returned to Qiqian City. During this time the two brothers had met, but time was too tight and they only exchanged a few words. Now that Yang Qindong had done all the important things he should have done, he slowly became free. This fourth brother came to visit again and this family banquet was held. Since it was a family banquet, there naturally wouldn't be any idle people. Even the few servants of the Yang family didn't come. The only ones sitting at the table were Yang Qindong, Hu Yan and Yang Yang. Hu Yan was the princess consort. When Yang Qindong wasn't in Kukian City, her status had always been high. Letting her sit with him expressed Yang Qindong's respect for his fourth brother. If there was no wife accompanying him, it would be a brotherly banquet. Haha, your sister-in-law didn't come. Otherwise you two would be able to talk. Yang Yang looked at Hu Yan and chuckled. Then fourth brother can send someone to bring sister-in-law over when you have time, Hu Yan replied with a smile. Alright, I'll send someone to do that. Ah, Yang Yang heartily laughed. Then he looked at Yang Qindong. He took the initiative to raise his wine glass and said with a sigh, Sixth brother, although I am your elder brother, I am convinced by what you have done. Come, let me toast you. Ah, fourth brother, please. Yang Qindong laughed heartily and toasted his brother. Although one was his fourth brother and the other was his sixth brother, the disparity in status made Yang Yang no longer dare to act like an elder brother. Over the years, Yang Qindong had proven his ability with facts. Not only did Yang Yang feel pressured when he saw Yang Qindong, he even felt restrained sometimes. Even big brother Yang Gong, second brother Yang Rang, third brother Yang Shi, and fifth brother Yang Guifang, who were far away in the capital of northern Ming, felt the same way. Once they saw the current Yang Qindong, they would also feel the pressure increase. After toasting with Yang Qindong felt a little more confident. At the very least, he didn't feel that Yang Qindong was estranged from his fourth brother. This gave him the confidence to say the words he had prepared because he truly wanted to do something and help Yang Qindong. Before he could think of a way to say it, Yang Qindong took the lead and asked, Fourth brother, are your injuries okay? Don't worry, the assassination attempt happened in the capital of the southern Ming dynasty. They must express their sincerity and compensate you personally. Because of an assassination attempt, the southern Ming dynasty had to compensate him. Only Yang Qindong had the confidence to say these words. If it was someone else, they would at most receive a few words of comfort. As for others, it was better not to think about it. It was just a daydream. Yang Yang used this as an opening and laughed. Then he patted his chest and said, Fourth brother, my body is very good. Sixth brother doesn't need to worry. As for compensation, you can decide. I have saved some money over the years, so I don't really care. But speaking of this matter, the southern Ming dynasty has contacted me in private. Oh, they contacted you in private? As if it was the first time he heard about this matter, Yang Qindong picked up a piece of cauliflower and put it in his mouth. Yang Qindong had already trained himself to not show his emotions on his face. Sometimes he would smile, but no one knew what he was thinking in his heart. Yes, they contacted me. Yang Yang didn't look at Yang Qindong's expression. Instead, he said, the person who contacted me has a big background. Big background? Then it must be a big shot. Let me guess. Yang Qindong's lips curled slightly. Some fragments of his mind couldn't help but faintly connect. Seeing that Yang Qindong wanted to guess, Yang Yang also became interested. Okay, then sixth brother can guess. Yang Qindong didn't let Yang Yang wait for long before he spat out 3 words, Manager Chow. Yang Yang's eyes flashed with astonishment. Then he couldn't help but give a thumbs up. Fourth brother is amazing. It is indeed Chao Jixiang. He is now the manager of the southern Ming dynasty's Imperial Guard. Following that, Yang Yang spilled everything he knew, as well as what Chao Jixiang's men had told him. As for this Chao Jixiang, although he has a high position and power in the southern Ming dynasty, that is only on the surface. Right now he is not too favored by the Ying sect. Moreover, there is an additional Chen Xingbao above him. This person has gotten together with another head eunuch, Kai Zhong, and is constantly squeezing his living space. As a result, Chao Jixiang is currently in a difficult situation. Thus, he used the assassination to contact me. On the surface, it seems like he is apologizing, but in reality he is intending to rely on me and change his allegiance. Fourth brother, I can feel it. Originally, I did not want to pay attention to them, but now I feel that it is an opportunity. I think that this is a trap. Yang Qindong really wanted to say this, but he didn't. Because he needed people to enter his trap, he could only pretend that he didn't know anything. However, no one knew better than him what kind of person Chao Jixiang was in history and how much trust he had received from the Ying sect's Zhu Qizhen. Speaking of Zhu Qizhen, he trusted the people around him, especially the eunuchs who seemed to have no bottom line. In history, even though he was tricked by Wang Zhen and lost the Temu castle, after the Ying sect's restoration, he issued an edict to clear Wang Zhen's name and used incense wood to summon spirits. In the capital, he built a Jingzhong shrine in the northern courtyard of the Wisdom Temple to worship spirits. Chao Jixiang had once been under Wang Zhen's tutelage. In the eyes of the Ying sect, he was one of Wang Zhen's substitutes. In history, he had plotted with General Shi Heng and Cabinet Grand Secretary Su Yozhen to lead troops to welcome the Ying sect's restoration. His contributions were even greater, and he was rewarded with large amounts of land. He also assisted in the military affairs of the capital. Chao Jixiang's nephews, Chao Xian and Chao Duo, were appointed as hereditary commanders of the Genie Guards, and were gradually promoted to become military governors. The number of people under Chao Jixiang's command who were able to become officials numbered in the hundreds and thousands. There were many officials in the court who relied on Chao Jixiang in hopes of being promoted. Chao Jixiang had a lot of power at that time, and together with Shi Heng they were called Chao Shi. It wasn't impossible for such a person to betray the Ying sect. However, if he betrayed Zhu Qizhen and fled to the Yangxie, he was not trustworthy at all. Looking at the Bugnam of Gojoseon Palace, apart from the guards in charge of security, there were no other men. There were no eunuchs at all. It had to be said that Yang Qindong did not have a good impression of eunuchs. This was because in history many bad things happened because of them. However, Yang Qindong had interacted with eunuchs before. For example, the head eunuch Mao Mu, who was serving the empress in the southern Ming palace, was one of Yang Qindong's men. From time to time he would send important information. However, on the surface Yang Qindong did not have any eunuchs by his side. In such an environment, if Chao Jixiang wanted to join the Yangxie, what could he do? He did not have a position for himself, so why would he surrender? It was not easy for him to escape from Beiming to the southern Ming dynasty and join the Ying sect's Zhu Qizhen. Why would he betray once more? Chapter 1630. And even if all of this was true, how could Yang Qindong believe a person who could betray him at any time? Yang Qindong was familiar with the history of the Great Ming dynasty. Even though Yang Qindong didn't seem to care much about the Great Ming dynasty, and Chao Jixiang was also a guard of the Imperial Secret Service. He was very mysterious and came and went without a trace. However, Yang Qindong also knew this person very well. It was because of this understanding that he was very sure that this person would never betray the southern Ming dynasty's emperor, Zhu Qizhen, nor would he surrender like Yang said. All of this was just a trap. With a plan in mind, Yang Qindong pretended that he didn't know anything and said to Yang, "Fourth brother, this is a good thing. Since that's the case, you can continue to contact him. If you need help, whether it's the Security Bureau or the CIA, we will do our best to help." This was exactly what Yang wanted to hear. He also wanted to make some achievements. He immediately said happily, "It just so happens that there are people sent by Chao Jixiang in the observation group. When the time comes, I will have a good chat with him." Seeing Yang Qindong's excited expression, Yang Qindong couldn't bear to dampen his enthusiasm. He also wanted to see what kind of trap the other party had set. He didn't believe that Yang Qindong would betray him. With the other party's ability, even if something happened to him, it was impossible for him to rise to the position of Yangxie. In other words, there would only be disadvantages and no benefits. Thus, Yang Qindong also wanted to see who else was involved in this matter. Of course, even if this matter didn't happen, Yang Qindong already had a rough understanding in his heart. He only needed to wait for the other party to set up the trap. At that time he would let the person who set up the trap know what it meant to seek death. Yang Qindong was holding a family banquet in the palace. Because Yang Wu was in charge of the palace's affairs, he had been accompanying him. In a small courtyard outside the palace, Cui Xiu left the palace with the excuse of not feeling well. She came to see Yang Lu, who had been waiting for a long time. "How was it? No one noticed you when you came out, right?" After seeing Cui Xiu appear, Yang Lu sat on a chair and asked with an unpleasant expression. Over the years, Yang Lu had hardly exercised his body. Moreover, he had indulged in eating, drinking, whoring and gambling. His body was no longer as good as before. Reporting to Master No. "The 8th Madam can't wait to see me?" As soon as I said I wasn't feeling well, she immediately approved my leave. Cui Xiu put away the arrogant attitude she had in the palace. At this moment she was as docile as an obedient lamb. It couldn't be helped, the lives of Cui Xiu's parents and 2 older brothers were in the hands of Yang Lu, and if she were to offend him, her family would immediately be destroyed. What she didn't know was that her family had already been killed by Yang Lu. Speaking of which, Yang Lu didn't have the time to send a few people to keep an eye on Cui Xiu's family. Besides, it was difficult for the living to keep a secret. Only the dead were the most reassuring. "Very good, you did well." Yang Lu still had some understanding of the ways of a master. He knew that if he praised his subordinates properly, they would be full of enthusiasm. You can rest assured that your family is now very safe. They have food and drink and they are living very well. When the matter is done, you will be given a large sum of money, and you can reunite with your family. Thank you, master. When she heard that she could reunite with her family, Cui Xiu'er's eyes flashed with yearning. The reason why she did these things was for the safety of her family. Well, you tell me, is there anything unusual about the 8th madam? When it came to business, Yang Lu, who was sitting on the chair, was a lot straighter. Reporting to master, the 8th madam has completely lost power. Bugnam of Gojoseon has been back for so long, and he has not come to the 8th madam's palace. Even Princess Yang Xian has not seen her father for so long. When Cui Xiu'er answered this question, her tone was very firm. Perhaps adults can deceive people, but a 6-year-old child can't deceive her. This answer was the same as the result of Yang Lu's analysis. He nodded with satisfaction and said, "It seems that Bugnam of Gojoseon really regards the 8th madam as the backing behind the ninjas. This is the best. He will not suspect others because of this. But you still have to keep an eye on it. If there is any movement, tell me immediately." "Yes, master." Cui Xiu'er replied respectfully. "Good. By the way, did Yang Wu find anything?" Thinking of his brother, Yang Lu's eyes had a trace of hesitation. He admitted that this time he took advantage of the feelings between brothers, but there was no other way. With the smuggling he did, once Yang Chendong found out, it would be difficult for him to survive. At that time, even if the other brothers pleaded for him, the result would not change. Over the years, Yang Lu thought that he understood Yang Chendong. This person had his own principles when doing things. Anyone who was willing to step on the line, no matter what kind of merits they had in the past, would be heavily punished. And what he did was not as simple as stepping on the line, it was simply challenging Yang Chendong's bottom line. There would definitely not be a good result. Even so, he could only give it a try. If he won, then he would reach the peak of his life. On the other hand, if he lost, he would just die. Even if he waited, he would still die. If there was still a chance, why not? As such, Yang Lu's outlook on life was completely distorted. When asked about Yang Wu, Cui Xiu'er replied truthfully, "This person, other than being a little lecherous, really doesn't have any other shortcomings. After observing for a while, I found that Yang Wu is not a greedy person. He never accepts gifts, and basically there is no abuse of power, so it is really difficult to threaten him." Yes, it is very difficult. Yang Lu couldn't help but sigh after listening. He had thought of dragging Yang Wu down more than once. It must be said that this person's position in Crimson City was too stable, and his influence was great. If he had his help, many things would be much smoother and he wouldn't have to be so careful today. For example, if Yang Wu was willing to cooperate with him, he could completely control the palace. Then, for the safety of his wife and child, Yang Hodong would have to bow down. Unfortunately, he couldn't find anything to use against him after searching for a long time. And if he were to say something rashly, not only would Yang Wu not help him, he might even report him to the young master. If that was the case, all the planning would be meaningless. Although it is very difficult, we still have to try. Let's continue searching. I don't believe that he won't be greedy when he has such great power. And as long as we find him, our big plan will succeed. Yang Lu still didn't give up. I understand. Cui Xiu'er nodded and agreed. Then Cui Xiu'er left. A figure flashed in the small courtyard, and Yang Ying walked out from the darkness. "Yang Ying, do you think it's possible to persuade Yang Wu to work for us?" Seeing Yang Ying, Yang Lu didn't straighten his body, and instead collapsed as comfortable as possible. A look of disgust flashed across Yang Ying's eyes as he stared at Yang Lu's body that was as soft as mud. Even Yang Lu didn't know that his real identity was a secret agent of the Southern Ming Brocade Guard, and was directly under the command of the factory guard, Chao Jixiang. In the entire Southern Ming Empire's embroidered uniform guard, only Chao Jixiang knew his identity. This was the greatest way to prevent his identity from being exposed. Facts also proved that all these years, ever since he sided with Yang Lu, and became the most trusted butler step by step, no one doubted his identity. And Yang Lu could be where he was today, it was all because of his help. A young man with ambition had turned into a gluttonous, lazy and greedy person who was afraid of death. Many times Yang Ying looked down on Yang Lu. This was because if the two of them were in different positions, he would never betray his master. This was one of the 5 servants of Bugnam of Gojoseon, and his identity was extremely noble. As long as he didn't court death, he would definitely live a life of glory. However, he didn't have the ability, and yet he still wanted to achieve great things. Why didn't he take a piss and look at himself in the mirror? For someone like Yang Lu, even if he was a small 7th-ranked county official, he wouldn't be able to manage a county well. Yet he still wanted to be like Yang Qindong, a prince of the great Ming dynasty? He really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Although he looked down on him in his heart before the mission was completed, he was still very respectful on the surface. He lowered his head and said, "Master, it's too difficult to persuade Jianghu and the risk is too great. It's better to abandon this idea for now. The Southern Ming Dynasty's observation group is about to arrive, and there's also a secret agent from the Southern Ming Brocade Guard following them. He will come in contact with Yang, so we should do a good job in writing this article. Yes, we still have to use Yang first. Speaking of which, this person is an idiot. He doesn't even know that he's being used, ha." Speaking of Yang Lu laughed loudly. However, how could he know that in Yang Ying's eyes he was also an idiot? After the Southern Ming Dynasty's observation group was bumpy on the sea for a few days, they finally appeared outside the new pier of Crimson City. Because of Yang Qindong's importance, in order to welcome them, Yu Qian and Xin Yu did a lot of work. When they knew that the observation group was about to arrive at the new pier, 2 old officials and a group of Yangxia officials stood outside the pier to welcome them. On the new pier there were many street lamps, and the cement steps were painted with a layer of gold paint. It looked very magnificent. In front of the pier, a military band was wearing brand new military uniforms and standing in formation, playing the song, "Our Great Han," adapted from our great Ming dynasty. Under the passionate rhythm, there was a group of youths wearing white and blue school uniforms standing at the side with flower garlands in their hands. They were all primary school students from the Yang Family Academy, and they were here to present flowers to the observation group. Chapter 1631. Apart from the military band and children, there were also a group of policemen in police uniforms. They were here to maintain law and order. After all, there were close to 15,000 members of the South Ming Observer Group, and their safety had to be guaranteed. Because of this, one of the elders, Chief Police Long Tainan, had also come. 3 of the 5 elders had come, which was enough to show how much importance Yang Xia placed on the South Ming Observer Group. Apart from the policemen, there were some officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as some commoners who had come to watch. It was not entirely accurate to say that they were commoners. Most of them were representatives chosen by their respective units to welcome the guests. They were all dressed in neat and tidy clothes, and their figures were tall and straight. The men were mostly handsome and the women were mostly beautiful. Every single one of them was full of energy, displaying the demeanor of the Han people of Crimson City. Apart from these Han people, there was also a welcoming group of 500 people. Among them there were white-skinned, black-skinned, yellow-haired, red-haired and blue-eyed people. They were all people who had been conquered by Yang Xia, and they were the ones who had performed well. Placing them here was a testament to the strength of the Yang faction and the nobility of the Han people. The welcoming group had more people than the observer group, and there were close to 20,000 of them. But even so, the plaza in front of Crimson City's new pier still didn't seem crowded. Just last year, the docks had undergone another expansion. Not to mention that there were only 30 to 40,000 people. Even if there were 100,000 people here, it would not be a problem. Everything on the pier had been seen clearly by the observer group. Seeing this scene, as a member of the observer group, they were naturally filled with pride. After all, no matter who went to a foreign place, they would want to be welcomed and not rolled their eyes. However, there were some people, mainly the South Ming officials, who maintained a smile on their faces, but their hearts were beating like drums. Why were the people welcoming them so energetic? Could these people really be ordinary people and not the nobles and gentry in the city? Thinking about the state of the South Ming people, they were not starving. Although they wouldn't starve to death, most of them were emaciated and their eyes were lifeless. They were like walking corpses. How could they be as energetic as the people who greeted them? Could it be a disguise? At this moment there were clearly many people who had such thoughts. The officials all decided to wait until they entered Crimson City to take a good look. Whether it was real or fake, they would be able to tell. The ship finally reached the shore, and the people who walked out from the first ship were the Southern Ming Empire's Minister of Personnel, Qin Sun, and the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhuo. The fact that they were able to join the observer group was their own idea, as well as the idea of the Southern Ming Emperor, Zhu Qixin. One of them was in charge of the officials, while the other was in charge of the country's finances. This time they came with the attitude of learning. He wanted to see how Yang Xia managed to accumulate so much money and food, and how he used his men. Speaking of which, both Yu Qian and Xin Yu knew these two. Especially since Yu Qian's position in the past was basically the same as theirs. When this old friend met, he naturally went up to greet him with a smile. Seeing Yu Qian and Xin Yu walk over, whether it was Qin Sun or Wang Zue, their expressions were somewhat unnatural. In the past they all belonged to the great Ming dynasty, but now they all had their own masters. More importantly, Yu Qian and Xin Yu were clearly doing better. When they were on the ship, Yang Xie's people told them about the general situation in Crimson City, and they mentioned the words of the fifth cabinet elder. Thinking about it, he was already a cabinet elder, but they were still only ministers. In addition, the southern Ming dynasty was currently in a precarious situation, while Yang Xie was at the peak of his power. The gap between the two sides would only be even greater, especially that Xin Yu. In the past he was simply a nobody in their eyes, a low-ranking official. But now he had become one of the Yang Xie's cabinet elders, and he held the power of life and death in his hands. If one studied the huge territory of Yang Xie, they would know that their real power was even greater than the king of a small country. Comparing oneself to others was indeed infuriating. Welcome, welcome. Yu Qian and Xin Yu smiled and extended their right hands to Qin Sun and Wang Zue. They were in other people's territory, and this time they were here to learn from them. The two ministers did not dare to be careless. They also quickly extended their right hands, and then the four of them shook hands. The etiquette of shaking hands was not in the great Ming dynasty, but at this moment, everyone followed suit without any feeling of disharmony. It was no wonder that this etiquette was accepted by the people in the future. After Ah Sun and Wang Zue, the Minister of Rights Xie Chong, the Minister of Justice Xiao Chua, the Minister of Works Wei Luo, the Minister of War Kuang Yi, and the Imperial Censor Shang Lu all came down from the other ships. Both sides greeted each other and greeted each other. What a big lineup. After the Minister of War Kuang Yi got down from the ship, his expression was somewhat ugly. In his view, this was clearly Yang Xie's show of strength. Bringing so many people, if this was not a show of force, what was it? Kuang Yi was a veteran, and because he was in charge of the Ministry of War, his temper was naturally worse than the average person's. Now that the southern Ming dynasty was about to clash with Yang Xie, one could imagine how much pressure he was under. His reaction was within everyone's expectations. Yu Qian and Xin Yu looked at each other and did not pursue the matter. Instead they chuckled. Then they said, "This is our king's wish. Whether you are willing or not, you have to abide by our rules. If not, please go back. The ship is right there, ready to leave at any time." Kuang Yi choked and wanted to turn around and leave. However, when he thought of his mission, he forced himself to endure it. He let out a cold snort and did not say anything else. The other ministers smiled awkwardly. They were not as unreasonable as Kuang Yi, so naturally they would not stand with him, nor would they turn around and leave. Seeing that no one was speaking, Yu Qian smiled and said, "Since no one has any objections, then let's follow the arrangements. Come, bring out the flowers." As soon as his voice fell, the primary school students who had been standing there for a while came forward with garlands in their hands. When they arrived in front of the officials, they tiptoed and put the garlands in their hands around the necks of the officials. Adults were always the most tolerant towards children. Not to mention such cute primary school students. They did not want anything but to give the wreaths. Therefore this segment was completed very smoothly. After that, a row of prepared trams drove to the plaza in front of the pier. The members of the observation group entered the trams in batches. When they entered the trams, the members of the observation group all had curious expressions on their faces. Even Qin Sun, Wang Zue, and the other high-ranking officials were no exception. Clearly they were very curious about the things in front of them. Rows of clean seats were placed in front of them. When they sat down, they felt the softness of the sponge. Then a clear glass appeared in front of them, allowing them to see everything from the inside out. When the members of the observation group entered the trams one by one, the first tram started and slowly drove out of the plaza, heading straight to Chichen City. At this moment, screams of surprise rose and fell one after another. Whether it was the people sitting in the first tram or the people in the other trams, when they saw that the trams that were not pulled by horses or pushed by people began to slowly move on the main road, they all screamed in surprise. People always had a fear of the unknown. Especially when the appearance of an object exceeded people's imagination, that feeling of fear would be even more intense. The members of the observation group screamed in surprise. No matter what rank the officials were, they all screamed inaudibly at this moment. They might be excited, surprised, or afraid from the bottom of their hearts. Fortunately, in each tram, in addition to the necessary driver, there was also a young and beautiful female soldier in Yang Xie. She wore a military uniform and looked valiant and formidable. Their voices sounded in a timely manner and began to explain the principles of the trams, explaining why the trams could move on their own. Although no one could really understand the principles that these female soldiers explained, At least everyone knew that this was not the result of magic. Everything was the result of scientific progress. Finally, some of the commotion was suppressed, and the members began to curiously observe the things inside and outside the trams. Wang's family of 4 was also in a tram that was starting to move. The tram moved slowly on the main road, and as it got closer to Chichen City, the number of tall buildings in the surroundings began to increase. What a beautiful city. It's even more beautiful than our capital. It's clean and the air is so good. Sitting in the row behind them, granddaughter Wang Shang said excitedly. That's right, it's really beautiful here. His wife, Wang Songshi, also sighed on the side. Her eyes were constantly changing with the surrounding scenery. The eldest grandson, Wang Zhiqing, who had always been calm, also pointed outside and shouted inaudibly, "Look, what's that? It's so fast, one person can fly away." Needless to say, Wang Zhiqing must have seen the bicycle on the bicycle path beside the tram. Although things like this were not widespread in the entire Chichen City, at least some people could already afford it. Therefore there was now an army of bicycles on the main road. This thing can even pull a person. That's amazing. Big brother, buy one too and pull me along, okay? Wang Shang was clearly shocked. Then her face filled with joy as she pulled Wang Zhiqing's arm with a pleading look. Alright, if we can buy it, we will definitely buy one. Wang Zhiqing also made a solemn vow. Chapter 1632. Big brother is the best. After receiving his promise, Wang Shang's beautiful eyes turned into crescent moons as she smiled. When Minister Wang's heard all of this, his heart was filled with complex emotions. He had only just entered Crimson City, but it had already brought him too many surprises and unknowns. At this moment he didn't know if this was a good or bad thing, but after seeing his grandson and granddaughter's performance, he had a faint feeling that Crimson City was too powerful and too rich. It was precisely because of this wealth and power that he had an indescribable curiosity and attraction to young people. He really didn't know if this curiosity was a good thing or a bad thing. However, he couldn't stop this at all. In fact, it wasn't just Wang Zhuo who had such thoughts. Many of the southern Ming officials in the observation group also had the same attitude. Among them, the shallow ones only saw the shock brought by the things in front of them, while the far-sighted ones saw the changes in the people around them and began to think deeply. Minister of War Kuang Yi was also sitting in a carriage. What was different was that the people around him weren't family members, but rather 3 young generals in the southern Ming army. One of them was a Chiliarch while the other 2 were centurions. From this point alone, it could be seen that Kuang Yi was definitely a good official who wholeheartedly served the court. Previously, Kuang Yi had a lot of dealings with Yang Qindong, and he had always fully supported Yang Qindong. That was because at that time, Yang Xie hadn't said anything. Yang Qindong's actions were also to help the southern Ming people quell the uprising. It was precisely because of this opportunity that Yang Qindong walked out of Baiming, defeated the southern Ming, and openly went to Crimson City to obtain everything he had now. However, no matter how powerful Yang Xie was in Kuang Ye's eyes, Yang Qindong was still a subject of the Great Ming. Whenever the Great Ming needed him, he should be called upon. However, all of this was just a matter of course. Why should everything he worked so hard for be unconditionally handed over to the court? If the imperial court was a court that truly cared about the people, perhaps Yang Qindong would really consider it. However, the current southern Ming dynasty was filled with officials who were greedy. In the eyes of most people, there was only a small plot of land in front of them. How many people truly cared about the livelihood of the common people? Moreover, history has already told us that the Han people studied the path of the Golden Mean. In history, other than the Han dynasty, there were very few examples of expansion. In the few wars with foreign countries they only won and then returned. There was no thought of going out at all. In this way it would be fine if they didn't encounter a powerful enemy, but if they did, what would happen to the common people? In later generations there was often a saying that the first class was a foreigner, the second class was a government official, the third class was a minor citizen, and the fourth class was a Han. At that time Yang Qindong was weak and could only watch. But now that he had this kind of ability he had to make changes. He had to conquer more territory for the Han people and let the Han people become the people at the top of the pyramid in this world. Kuang Yi naturally didn't know what Yang Qindong was thinking. Even if he knew, he probably wouldn't agree. This wasn't surprising. In the eyes of most of the great Ming officials, other than the Ming dynasty, the rest of the world was uncivilized. What was the use of occupying uncivilized people? Moreover, it would waste a lot of money. Kuang Yi couldn't imagine that war was also the best way to plunder money. As long as it was done well and the war was won, the dividends would be very generous. Unfortunately, the Ming people didn't know this. They only saw the wealth used to mobilize the army and didn't see the spoils after the war was won. Therefore at this moment Kuang Yi and Yang Qindong's ideas had undergone a serious change. Especially when Kuang Yi saw that Yang Xia wanted to make a move on the southern Ming dynasty. Under the heavy pressure, the friendship between the two of them was completely lost. This was also why Kuang Yi didn't have a good expression when he got off the ship. This time, following the observation group to Crimson City was also Kuang Ye's last effort. He wanted to talk to Yang Qindong about the southern Ming dynasty. Although it was unlikely that there would be any good results, Kuang Yi was still willing to give it a try. Sir, this Crimson City is different from our southern Ming dynasty cities. The only chili arch accompanying them, Kahong said carefully. How could the black-faced Kuang Yi not see it? However, at this moment he didn't know what to say. He could only remind him again, look more and speak less. Especially the army camp in the city. You must go in and take a look. Yes, but Kahong's face revealed a trace of difficulty. This wasn't the southern Ming dynasty. Their identities as military officials were useless. If it wasn't for Bugnam of Gojoseon's permission, trespassing into the army camp would be a capital offense. Knowing what Kahong was worried about, Kuang Yi waved his hand and said, no matter, I will talk to Bugnam of Gojoseon about this matter. I will fight for you. The moment he said that, it was clear that Kuang Yi didn't have much confidence in this matter. Speaking of which, he was the Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince, the Minister of War, a lower-class rank 1 official, which was already quite impressive. However, if Yang Qindong didn't care about him, there was nothing he could do. Hearing Kuang Ye's words, Kahong and the other two didn't say anything else. Instead they looked out of the window with curious gazes. The scenery constantly changed. The carriage entered the city and finally stopped in front of the Yangxia Hotel. Speaking of the Yangxia Hotel, it was built 3 years ago. Because the Yang family's territory and influence had expanded greatly, the Yang family Grand Hotel was built on the largest scale when it was first built. It took up a few hundred hectares of land, and many of the surrounding buildings were demolished. After 3 years it was finally completed. It was open last month. The entire hotel was 8 stories high, and there were more than 20,000 bedrooms. There were also countless restaurants and boutiques. With such a large scale, it was more than enough to accommodate the southern Ming dynasty's observation team. Thus, when everyone walked out of the carriage, the room keys were handed to them. A thick red carpet was laid out from the entrance of the hotel all the way to the hotel. As soon as they entered the hotel, the various chandeliers above their heads were reflected in everyone's eyes. At this time, although the sky wasn't dark yet, the light from the electric lights was already useful. When they saw the colorful lights flickering above the chandeliers, almost everyone in the observation team was shocked again. Not only that, when everyone entered the elevator in the lobby and was suddenly brought up, many people were so scared that their faces turned pale. Then they each took their own keys and entered the floor. After entering the room, everything in front of them opened their eyes. There was a separate luxurious bathroom, a comfortable big bed, and a wide and bright floor-to-ceiling window. There was also a kettle that could boil hot water when it was turned on, as well as instant noodles, ham sausages, canned food of various flavors, and various drinks placed in every room. It was so bright that it blinded most people's eyes. Wang Shang was a girl who was very curious about anything new. When she read the instructions in the room and learned how to use the things, she immediately boiled a kettle of water. Then she poured the instant noodles and ham sausages into it and quickly ate until she was full. Touching her full stomach, she quickly walked out of the room and went to the next room. Then she knocked on the door of each room. Soon, under her efforts, most of the instant noodles, ham sausages, and other things in the rooms were wiped out. The kind of junk food that everyone was used to in the future had now become incomparably delicious in the eyes of many people. As a direct result, when it was time for dinner, everyone came out of their rooms and entered the banquet hall in batches. When they saw the dazzling array of delicacies, many of them cast resentful gazes at Wang Shang. Wang Shang also felt very wronged. How would she know that Yang Xia had prepared so much delicious food for them at night? She thought that the so-called welcome banquet would be the same as the banquets held in the palace in the past. There would only be a small amount of food at each table, and there would be so many rules that they wouldn't even be full in the end. Fortunately, Wang Shang was very young and digested food quickly. It didn't take long for her to compete with some of her younger sisters in the same industry to eat the food in the buffet. The biggest advantage of a buffet was that you could choose food at any time according to your appetite. Then you could put it on a plate and start eating. There was no need to pay attention to any rules, and there was no need to wait for the guests to call you and fall into an awkward situation. This was the favorite way of eating for young people. They had enough of the rules at home and could finally let go of themselves for once. Of course they were very happy. On the other hand, when officials like Kuang Yi saw the food, their eyes widened and they felt that it was a waste. Some of the more observant people did a rough calculation. They were afraid that tonight's entertainment would cost a lot of money. Yu Qian and Xin Yu also brought a group of Yangxia officials to join the welcome banquet. Compared to most of the southern Ming officials who were at a loss or ate and drank to their heart's content, the Yangxia officials who were used to this kind of scene just held a cup of wine and casually chatted with others. In addition, all of the Yangxia officials were wearing gray Chinese tunic suits, which made them look quite stylish. Bugnam of Gojoseon has arrived. A loud shout sounded, and a group of black cavalry rushed in from the entrance of the banquet hall. They were all dressed in neat military uniforms. After entering the banquet hall, they guarded the main roads and stood on both sides. They didn't delay everyone's meal and could guarantee that they could control the situation and deal with any unexpected situations. After waiting for these Longwei officials to stand in their positions, Yang Chendong took Hu Yan's hand and strode into the banquet hall with Wan Xiaochen, Leng Song, and other officers in military uniforms. Today Yang Chendong was wearing a marshal's military uniform, which was rare, and it made him look particularly energetic. When the shiny black leather shoes landed on the red carpet, everyone's attention was instantly drawn to them. Chapter 1633. Wow. So handsome. Yang Chendong's appearance was seen by many women in the observation group, especially girls like Wang Shang. They couldn't help but cry out in surprise. There were also countless girls whose eyes were already filled with little stars. Yang Chendong was only 37 years old. This was the age when men were at their most charming. Coupled with the military uniform, he looked even more energetic. In particular, his innate temperament gave people a sense of vigor. This was something that many southern Ming officials did not have. As soon as Yang Chendong appeared, he immediately attracted the attention of everyone present. This was especially true for the older ladies and their wives, who all looked at him with watery eyes. Little girls like Wang Shang, who looked like an uncle, were even more attractive. At this moment, even Kuang Yi, who wanted to argue with Yang Chendong, couldn't help but sigh. At least in terms of appearance, Yang Chendong was impeccable. Holding Hu Yan's hand, Yang Chendong entered with a smile. He looked around as if he didn't have a focal point, but he also seemed to see everyone in his eyes, giving people a feeling of being valued. At this moment, Hu Yan was also smiling like a flower. The noble temperament of a queen was undeniable. Walking together with Yang Chendong, she gave people the feeling that they were young girls. Applause quickly sounded in the banquet hall. Yu Qian, Xin Yu, Wan Xiaochen, Leng Song, and Long Tainan, who was in charge of security, led the applause. Soon the hall was enveloped in warm applause. Influenced by this, the Southern Ming observation group also applauded, causing the atmosphere to reach its peak. Yang Chendong didn't have any intention of speaking. He had just arrived in Crimson City and didn't know much about this place. As such, it was still too early for him to say anything. It was better to let everyone see and understand him first before he spoke. At that time, the meaning would be more than 100 times greater. Yang Chendong, who didn't have any intention of speaking, held a wine glass and lightly clinked glasses with Chen Sun, Wang Zua, Xie Chong, and the others. Regardless of whether they were on the same side or not, they all had smiles on their faces as if they were old friends who hadn't seen each other for a long time. However, this harmonious atmosphere quickly changed due to Kuang Ye's arrival. Although Kuang Yi was over 80 years old, he quickly squeezed in front of Yang Chendong because of his tall stature and the fact that he had practiced martial arts when he was young. In response to Kuang Ye's arrival, Chen Sun and the others naturally made way for him. At the same time, they couldn't help but take a step back. They had seen Kuang Ye's performance along the way, so they naturally didn't think that Kuang Yi was here to bond. The truth was no different from what everyone had guessed. As soon as Kuang Yi squeezed in, he put on a fake smile and said in a somewhat sarcastic tone, "Wunan Wang is so mighty. So it's Duke Kuang, long time no see." Seeing Kuang Yi squeeze his way in, Yang Chendong, as the host, put on an appropriate smile. Kuang Yi acted as if he didn't see Yang Chendong's goodwill. Instead, he said sourly, "Bugnam of Gojoseon, to think that you've always been the best to the Han people. To think that you once told this old man that money should be spent wisely. But look at this banquet hall, the food prepared here must be expensive. With this money, wouldn't it be better to leave this food for the people? Why waste it here?" Once the word waste came out, Chen Sun, Wang Zua, and Xie Chang's expressions immediately turned ugly. What was waste? Was it a waste to let everyone eat? Was it not a waste to let the people eat? This was clearly Kuang Yi looking for trouble. At this moment, everyone's impression of him had a trace of disgust. On the other hand, Yang Qindong's expression didn't change. He understood Kuang Yi. The information sent by the intelligence department also showed that this old man wasn't very particular about his food. He didn't have extravagant expectations of delicacies as long as he was full. Therefore, it wasn't surprising that he would say something like this. However, this was his own welcome banquet after all. As the host, Yang Qindong naturally wouldn't look too good if he said something like this at such an occasion. Yang Qindong had always been the type of person who would return the favor 10 times over. How could he be polite? He gently swirled his wine cup and then raised his head, asking word by word, "Waste? Ah, Sir Kuang, you're really ignorant." The change from Duke Kuang to Sir Kuang already proved Yang Qindong's attitude. At this moment, Kuang Yi clearly didn't notice this. He only heard Yang Qindong say that he was ignorant. He immediately became furious and his voice rose 2 pitches as he asked, "Bugnam of Gojoseon, what do you have to say?" His raised voice immediately attracted the attention of everyone in the banquet hall. Originally, because of Yang Qindong's appearance, many people intentionally or unintentionally gathered here. Now that Kuang Yi had shouted, everyone's attention and curiosity were all drawn here. Kuang Yi was angry and his face was full of anger. However, Yang Qindong didn't care about this. Instead, he chuckled and said in a voice that wasn't loud, but could be heard clearly by the people around him. "Sir Kuang, haven't you heard of the ancient saying that reason doesn't depend on one's voice? Also, this prince doesn't agree with your words of waste. A person living in this world can eat better and wear better clothes through their own efforts. What's wrong with that? Do we have to eat chaff and swallow vegetables? If that's the case, then what's the meaning of life?" After being reprimanded by Yang Qindong, Kuang Yi's face became even uglier. However, he didn't lose his composure because he had already thought of the consequences of his words. Therefore, facing Yang Qindong, he didn't back down and said, "There's nothing wrong with a person's pursuit. However, the ancient people also said that if one achieves success, they will help the world. You, Bugnam of Gojoseon, boasted that you will lead the Han people to a better life. Have you done it? You're eating and drinking here, but have you thought about whether the people outside have food to eat? Even if it's just eating chaff and swallowing vegetables, can you do it?" "Of course I can do it." Almost without hesitation, Yang Qindong said this sentence. Then he turned around and looked at the people attending the banquet and said, "Since this prince has said that he will give the people a better life, then he will naturally do it." This point, everyone can find the answer during the inspection of Chichen City. If there really are people starving to death on the streets, or as Kuang Yi said, most of the people are eating chaff and swallowing vegetables, then you can curse this prince. This prince will accept it. On the other hand, if the people really live a better life under this prince's lead and don't have to worry about food and clothing, then this prince would like to ask you, "Kuang Yi, what will you do?" Kuang Yi was truly stunned at this moment. He originally thought that after he criticized Yang Qindong would find all kinds of reasons to explain himself. Then he would pretend to be magnanimous and let him off. This way he would be able to show his magnanimity and suppress Yang Qindong's arrogance. This would be very beneficial for the future interactions between Ming and Yang Xia. But he never expected that Yang Hodong had no intention of backing down at all. Instead, he accepted his challenge. At this moment he was first shocked, then he was overjoyed. What a good Yang Qindong. Sure enough, he boasted shamelessly. He actually dared to boast like this. If that was the case, then he was asking for a beating. If that was the case, then he would not be polite anymore. Okay, if everything is as Bugnam of Gojoseon said, then this old man will apologize on the spot and turn around to leave. Kuang Yi said heroically. Very good, I hope that some people will keep their words. His gaze landed on Kuang Yi. Yang Qindong's expression was very calm, as if he had already won the bet. This was only a small interlude in the banquet, because Yang Qindong soon left. This was the first time everyone had met. He would not be of any use if he stayed. On the contrary, he would give everyone a sense of pressure and make everyone unhappy. With Yang Qindong's departure, the banquet hall became lively again. Wang Zhuo also found an opportunity to come to Yu Qian's side. The two of them were old officials of the Great Ming dynasty and had interacted before. Because they admired each other's character, their relationship was not bad. Now that there was an opportunity, of course they had to have a good chat. Wang Zhuo first observed Yu Qian and found that he did not feel unhappy because of Kuang Yi's interference. Instead, he had a smile on his face and seemed to be in a good mood. He asked curiously, "Yu Qian, I'm sure you saw what happened just now. Are you not worried about your king at all?" "Worried? Why should I be worried? Yu Qian asked in confusion. Wang Zuo was also surprised. He thought to himself, can we still have a good chat? However, he still said, Yu Qian, are you not afraid that Grand Tutor Kuang will really wander around Crimson City? Why should I be afraid? Yu Qian asked again. Then he chuckled and said, Wang Zuo, since the king dares to say this, there is naturally no problem. That's right, if Wang Zuo does not believe me, you can also look around the city. If you really find people who cannot afford to eat or wear clothes, tell me at any time. I'm also willing to apologize like the king. After saying this, Xin Yu came to find Yu Qian and said that there were a few officials there who wanted to ask him some questions. Soon only Wang Zuo was left. At this moment, Wang Zuo was rooted to the spot as if he had been struck by lightning. He was still thinking about what had happened just now. He understood Yu Qian. He was definitely a man of action and was also a bit idealistic. There was no problem with this kind of person doing things, but because he was too righteous, it was easy for him to offend people. If he wanted others to admire him, it was basically impossible. This kind of person would not boast. But what did he just say? He even told him to look around the city. If this wasn't boasting, then what was? Chapter 1634. Even when the great Ming dynasty was at its wealthiest, there were still beggars in the capital. That was something that the emperors of the great Ming dynasty could not achieve even after putting in so much effort. How many years had it been since Crimson City was built? How could there not be a single person who could not afford to eat? Also, what did Yu Qian call Yang Qindong? King. That was not king but king. Even though it was just a single word, there was a lot more to it. This was enough to prove Yu Qian's admiration and even trust towards Yang Qindong. What kind of person was Yu Qian? He was definitely a role model for all officials. He would only treat the commoners well and would never lower his head to the nobles. Even when he was in the great Ming dynasty, the emperor was unable to make him lower his head. But now he actually respected Yang Qindong so much. What was going on? Could it be that Yang Qindong's kindness towards the commoners had surpassed Yu Qian's understanding and had gained his recognition? Could it be that the truth was as Yang Qindong had said? That there were no commoners in Crimson City who could not afford to eat? No. That's impossible. A voice shouted in Wang Zuo's mind. Since ancient times, there had never been a dynasty that could provide enough food for all the commoners. At most, 60 to 70% of the commoners would have sufficient food and clothing. After all, not everyone was willing to work hard. There would always be those who were lazy. Shaking his head, Wang Zuo could not understand. However, Wang Zuo had already made up his mind. While he was in Crimson City, he had to walk around and see if Yang Qindong and Yu Qian were lying or if it was the truth. If the commoners were truly living good lives, wouldn't that mean that Yang Hodong was not only skilled in war but also in governance? If that was the case, it would be a blessing for the commoners to hand the southern Ming dynasty over to him. On the other side, Kuang Yi also retreated, and Captain Kohong quickly came up to welcome him. Kuang Yi was in good spirits. It was clear that the bet from before had given him quite a bit of confidence. When he saw Kohong and the other two centurions, he said excitedly, "Tomorrow, all of you will split up and have a good look around the city. Let this old man expose Bugnam of Gojoseon's lies." Of course, Kuang Yi didn't think that all the people in Qichin City could have enough food and clothing. This was simply impossible. As for why Yang Qindong dared to say this, it must be because the other party was prepared and would hide those people. Since that was the case, as long as they looked carefully, there was no need to worry about not finding any clues. At that time, he wanted to see how ugly Yang Qindong's expression would be. At that time, he would use this momentum to raise the diplomatic issue between the southern Ming dynasty and Yangxia. Presumably, there would be a breakthrough. Facing Kuang Ye's orders, Kohong and the other centurions naturally couldn't help but nod. Although they were shocked by Yang Xia's generosity and were envious of the Yang Xia's lifestyle, they knew that their families were still in the southern Ming dynasty. They would eventually have to go back, so they had to listen to Sir Kuang Ye's words. At this time, it wasn't just Kuang Ye. Many people were also doubting Yang Qindong's words. Those who could join the observation group were naturally wealthy, but this didn't mean that they hadn't seen poor people or beggars before. After all, it was precisely because there were poor people that they were called rich, right? Many people also decided to look around tomorrow. They didn't believe that Bugnam of Gojoseon could hide those people so well. They didn't believe that they couldn't find a single one of them. When the banquet ended, many people made such a decision in their hearts. But for most of the family members, they were attracted by the neon lights on the road outside the hotel. Looking out the window of the hotel, people were walking to and fro on the streets. Under the illumination of the straight cement road lamps, everyone was talking and laughing. There were even some young people walking on the streets hand in hand. They didn't care about the gazes of outsiders at all. And from their clothes they were all wearing bright clothes. Everyone had a happy expression on their faces. This scene was impossible to see in the capital of Nanjing. First of all, there was a curfew in the capital. Once night fell, no one was allowed to walk on the street. How could there be any excitement? Second, even if there was no curfew, it was dark everywhere. If one wasn't careful, one would step into a ditch. Who would be willing to go out in such an environment? As for the third, there were no entertainment facilities in the capital at night. Even if one went out, what could they do? In comparison, the scenery outside the Wuxia hotel was very different. Wang Shang stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window in the room and looked outside. Her heart was itching. At this moment there was a slight knock on the door. With a trace of doubt, Wang Shang opened the door and saw her brother, Wang Jiqing. At this time Wang Jiqing was already dressed. He didn't look like he was going to sleep at all. After seeing his sister, the first thing he said was, "I'm going to call a few friends to go out for a walk. Do you want to come?" Of course, Wang Jiqing wasn't being kind. He called his sister because he was afraid that his grandfather would punish him. If his sister followed him, he would have an extra shield. Wang Shang originally had this idea. Now that her brother said it, she couldn't suppress the restlessness in her heart. She immediately nodded and said, Okay, wait for me to put on my coat." Wang Shang and Wang Jiqing quickly went out of the room. They called a few young friends and the group of people went downstairs. Here they saw the police in charge of security. While they were still thinking about whether going out would be prohibited, a police officer took the initiative to come up and ask them what they wanted. With a trace of nervousness and apprehension, Wang Jiqing spoke his mind. Then he said that if it was inconvenient, they wouldn't go out. However, to their surprise, the police only smiled and began to ask for their names. Then, some temporary identification documents were handed to them. "You can go out, but you must have identification documents. Otherwise, it will be troublesome if you encounter a patrol officer. Okay. Now that you have these identification documents, there won't be any problems." After saying that, the police officer took the initiative to step aside and completely let them through the door behind him. After taking the identification documents, Wang Jiqing, Wang Shang, and the others walked out of the Yang family hotel excitedly. However, what they didn't know was that behind them, a small team of 10 police officers in casual clothes was following them not far away. No matter what, they were still an observation team from the southern Ming dynasty. If their personal safety was threatened in the southern Ming dynasty, it would be equivalent to slapping Yang Xie and Bugnam of Gojoseon in the face. It would be equivalent to the police force not doing their job well. After leaving the Yang family hotel, Wang Jiqing walked in the direction of the crowd. After walking for more than 2 miles, he saw a square that covered an area of dozens of acres. There were many young and middle-aged people dancing here. The dance music was played by several loudspeakers around the square. It was very rhythmic, allowing people to quickly integrate into the rhythm. Outside the square there were small stalls everywhere. Some of them sold food and some sold all kinds of trinkets. Basically, there were some people surrounding each stall. From afar it gave people a very lively feeling. This place is really bustling. Wang Jiqing stood on the spot when he saw this scene. This scene could not be seen in the capital of the southern Ming dynasty. Perhaps it could only be seen on the 15th day of the first lunar month when there were lanterns. However, that was only because there were many people. In terms of entertainment and food, it could not be compared to here. Isn't that so? This place is really good. I don't want to leave anymore. Wang Shang said with emotion. However, when Wang Shang heard this sentence, his expression changed involuntarily. At this moment he could not help but have some thoughts in his mind. It was only when his companions strode forward and began to beckon him to hurry up that Wang Jiqing replied, "Coming." Then he followed and blended into the crowd. There were delicious food, fun things and even acrobatics. There were many things that Wang Jiqing and the others had heard of but never seen before. After asking about the price, they found out that it was not very expensive. At least, for officials like them, they could definitely afford it. Therefore, it did not take long for them to be filled with all kinds of spoils of war. After buying a lot of things and chatting with some merchants, they found out that there was more than one square like this in Sushin City. This was the central city district and it was also the largest square. There were many similar squares in the other 4 districts. There were even such squares in some residential areas. However, due to the large population, most of the squares were not as lively as this one. Hearing that there was more than one such place, Wang Jiqing was truly shocked. Out of instinct, he asked the merchant about the taxes. He had estimated that every stall was extremely lively. There were many people lining up in front of it. In this way there would be a lot of transactions in one night. The profits would not be small, so the business tax should be quite high. Ah, you're talking about the business tax. We are a small business, so it's only 10%. The stall owner was clearly someone who was willing to chat. There was no taboo on this topic. 10% business tax? How do we collect that? Wang Jiqing was puzzled. He finally understood that 10% of the transactions in one night would be used to pay the tax. However, how would the tax collection department know how many transactions there were? Damn it, Bugnam of Gojoseon has created such good conditions for us Han people. Of course we have to be content. Naturally there are also people who are unaware. However, there are many workers in this square. They will secretly record the transactions of the stalls and compare them later. If anyone was caught for tax evasion, they would be locked up in prison and forced to do hard labor. With such a good life in front of them, no one dares to play with such thoughts. Chapter 1635. Self-awareness. Hearing this, Wang Jiqing was extremely surprised. However, when he calmed down and thought about it carefully, he was relieved. If it was him, he would not play any tricks on the tax system in such a good environment. Moreover, the boss had just said that there were people who were caught for tax evasion and were treated as examples. This was enough to deter others. With such soft and hard methods, it was no wonder that everyone would cooperate fully. Naturally, all of this was based on the fairness of the tax collectors. If it was in the southern Ming dynasty, who knew what those small officials would do for their own selfish reasons? In the end, even a good policy needed to be implemented by people. If the right people could not be found, no matter how good the policy was, it would be a waste. However, the Yangxia was extremely strict with the corruption of officials. Officials could not do business. This was already an iron law. Reputation and money could not be taken away by one person, right? Officials also had to regularly assess their performance. If their performance was poor 3 times in a row, they would be fired. This was the saying, the capable are the top and the mediocre are the bottom. Officials were strictly prohibited from using their authority and receiving benefits. Once discovered, 3 generations of officials were not allowed to do business, and 5 generations were not allowed to be officials. Then they could only rely on working for others to earn money. Facing such a severe punishment, there were not many people who dared to test the law. Speaking of which, under such a severe punishment, the treatment of officials was really good. Not only were their monthly salaries high, but they also enjoyed 2 holidays a year. During the holidays there were also subsidies from the government, allowing the officials to walk around and look around. With the basic salary, it was very easy for an official to support a dozen people. There were also various protective measures for officials. For example, if an official was sick, they could be reimbursed. In other words, it was basically free. There was also a pension for officials when they retired, which could ensure that they could live well in their old age. With all kinds of protective measures, the officials did not have any worries and could do things without worry. This was completely different from the southern Ming dynasty officials, who relied on their salary as a supplement and corruption as their main source of income. As an official in the southern Ming dynasty, if there was no gray income, it was basically very difficult to survive. This directly led to the big officials being greedy and the small officials being greedy. Regarding all of this, even Emperor Yingzong could only turn a blind eye. He couldn't be ruthless. Otherwise, those officials who relied on their salary might not even be able to live as well as some of the tyrants. If that was the case, why did he do that? How could he not hear it? Qianli became an official only for wealth. That night, Wang Jiqing heard a lot and saw a lot. His mind was almost stuffed with thoughts. His thoughts suddenly seemed to have entered another world. He suddenly realized that some things could be done this way and they could be done even better after doing so. In the same small courtyard, Yang Lu was sitting on a chair listening to Yang Ying's report. Master, the people we sent out have returned. They said that the members of the observation group are accompanied by the police when they go out, so there is no chance to make a move. No chance? Yang Lu's face showed displeasure. For others, the arrival of the observation group from the southern Ming dynasty might not be obvious. They might just think that Yang Xie was expressing his goodwill to the southern Ming dynasty. However, Yang Qindong was very clear that this was clearly Yang Qindong trying to win people's hearts and show off his muscles. Perhaps when the observation group returned to the southern Ming dynasty, waves would rise. At that time, Emperor Yingzong would suffer the consequences of his own actions. In order to prevent Yang Qindong from achieving his goal, Yang Lu was prepared to sabotage. If someone in the observation group was killed, the most important person would be killed, then the observation group would be in danger. Then they would no longer have the mood to stay in Crimson City. Naturally, this plan would be ruined. However, he didn't expect that the police force would be dispatched. However, Yang Lu still said with some dissatisfaction, "From what I know, the Wolf Fang Special Forces is not in Crimson City. It's just a few policemen. Can they really stop the assassins we sent out?" Seeing that Yang Lu was doubting his ability, Yang Ying quickly explained, "Master, the strength of the police force is not bad. Especially in the past few years, because of sufficient funds, the police force has undergone a lot of training. Although they may not be able to display the strength of a real soldier on the battlefield, they are still quite capable in the area of local protection. Of course, no matter how powerful they are, they can't be compared to our people. However, if our people make a move, I'm afraid it will be difficult to escape from the police force. After all, there are too many of them. Just in Crimson City, the police force has reached more than 60,000 people. It's difficult for two fists to fight against four hands. Once our people are caught, I'm afraid it will affect the later part of the plan." Listening to these explanations, Yang Lu could only put away his thoughts of sabotaging. However, he still muttered in dissatisfaction, "There are more than 60,000 policemen in Crimson City. Are they crazy? How much money do they have to spend?" At this point, Yang Lu couldn't help but let out a long sigh. When it comes to money, Yangshi is really not short of money now, especially when the navy is constantly winning. Under their strong ships and cannons, it doesn't take long for the various countries and forces that are targeted by them to be hit hard, and then they can only choose to surrender. After that, a large amount of gold and silver was sent back to Crimson City via the transport ship. With money, it would naturally be easier to do things. Of course, it wouldn't be difficult to recruit people. Moreover, he had already heard that not all of the 60,000 policemen would be stationed in Crimson City. In the end, more than half of them would be arranged to be stationed in other Yangxia territories. They were only doing their internships now. This was just a matter of spending more money. Thinking about the 60,000 policemen, there wouldn't be any problems with the safety of the 15,000 South Ming observation group. If he really wanted to make a move, the chances of him being caught were very high. In the end, he could only shake his head and say to Yang Ying, "Then forget it. This risk isn't worth it." "That's right." Yang Ying agreed. Then he seemed to have thought of something and said, "Zhu Huiyun isn't to blame. If he had attacked with all his might, Yang Qindong would have died in Yunnan Manor and Mo Gui wouldn't have died." That's right, Mo Gui was Yang Ying's confidant. The Uncle Ying that Mo Gui mentioned was Yang Ying. Unfortunately, because of Zhu Huiyun's carelessness, Mo Gui died in the end. When he heard the news, Yang Ying was really sad for a while. Not to mention Yang Lu and Yang Ying's helplessness. The next morning, Wang Songshi saw that it was time for breakfast. Her grandson and granddaughter weren't up yet, so she went outside the room and woke them up. When two of the family of four were yawning during breakfast, Wang's face became ugly as he said, "I told you guys to rest early. Look at you guys. Didn't you sleep last night?" "We slept, but it was too late," Wang Shang said casually. As soon as she finished speaking, she immediately covered her mouth with her right hand. Obviously, she knew that she had spilled the beans. Seeing that his sister had confessed so quickly, Wang Jiqing sighed at his sister's lack of composure and took the initiative to confess everything to Wang Zhuo. At the same time, he also told him what he had seen and heard that night. At first, Wang Zhuo was eating while listening as if he didn't pay much attention to it. Young people were curious about everything and liked to join in the fun. It was normal for him to have such a reaction. However, when he heard about how lively the square was and how there were over 10,000 people gathered there, his expression finally changed. He put down the chopsticks in his hand and listened attentively. From time to time, he would nod his head and cooperate with Wang Jiqing's explanation. Finally, Wang Jiqing gave a general idea of what had happened. He stopped and took the initiative to drink a mouthful of porridge. Then he looked at his grandfather, who was silent. He knew that his grandfather was thinking about something, so he didn't disturb him and just ate by himself. He had to walk around more today. If he didn't eat his fill, he wouldn't be able to stay strong. When Wang Jiqing was almost done with his meal, Wang Zhuo, who was sitting opposite him, finally opened his mouth. "Cheng, have you calculated how much money you can get from the square you saw yesterday?" Wang Jiqing hurriedly put down his chopsticks and said without hesitation, "Grandfather, grandson has calculated. Even if it wasn't 30,000 taels, it should be at least 25,000 taels." "That much? Then doesn't that mean that the tax collected from Yangxia in one night is close to 3,000 taels? That's close to 100,000 taels a month? Over 1,000,000 taels a month? And this is just a square?" Obviously, this answer really shocked Wang Zhuo. "Yes," Wang Jiqing said with a firm expression. He was also shocked when he came to this conclusion. It had to be said that this was because the quality of the food and the quality of the goods sold in the square was good. In addition, there was a lot of traffic. Moreover, the people of Qian City seemed to be very wealthy and didn't lack money. Just the square alone could collect 1,000,000 taels a year in taxes. This was equivalent to 2 months of taxes for the entire southern Ming dynasty. One had to know that the current southern Ming dynasty didn't have 3 provinces. In a year, the taxes collected were only 7 to 8 million taels. This was also because the southern Ming dynasty was very rich. If it was by Ming, it wouldn't be that much. In comparison, the difference in money was too great. These two were not opponents of the same level. If they were to fight on the same stage, what would the result be? Presumably, even an idiot would be able to tell. At this moment, Wang Zuo was even more silent. He seemed to have already seen the scene of the southern Ming dynasty being swallowed up by Wuxia. The only thing to consider was how long the southern Ming dynasty could last. Chapter 1636. Although there were all sorts of delicious breakfasts in front of him, Wang Zuo was unable to swallow any of them. When he saw that his family had finished eating, he stood up resolutely. He had decided to properly observe and investigate Crimson City. He wanted to find out where the drawbacks of this city were. Not only Wang Zuo but basically all the members of the observation group left Yangxia Hotel after breakfast and headed in different directions. They were followed by a large number of police officers. This was for their safety, so no one objected to it. More than 10,000 members of the observation group were like gusts of wind, blowing in all directions of Crimson City. Very quickly, several city districts were filled with their people. Some factories were also filled with their people, and some shops and department stores were also filled with their people. After an entire day, all the way until evening, these people began to return one after another from all over the place. If one observed carefully, they would notice that most of the officials had a serious expression on their faces. Only the accompanying family members, especially the children, would reveal ignorant smiles. Clearly, this day's visit allowed everyone to see the strength and potential of Crimson City. This day's visit allowed everyone to see the huge gap between southern Ming and Yangxia. This day's visit allowed everyone to see the prosperity and beautiful life of Crimson City. If it wasn't for the purpose of nitpicking, even Kuang Yi had to admit that Crimson City was a very suitable city to live in. The security here was stable. If one had money here, one could sell many things. If one didn't have money here, as long as one was willing to work hard, one could also earn a lot of money and live a better life. The commoners here were not as sickly as the commoners of the southern Ming Empire. On the contrary, they were full of vigor and walked with a spring in their step. When the commoners here walked on the streets, they walked as if they were flying. They knew that time was money and were using every minute to work hard. The commoners here had more and better prospects for the future. They were far from the lazy and dispirited southern Ming Empire commoners who did not know where to go. The commoners here, the more they compared, the greater the gap. The hearts of the southern Ming officials became heavier and heavier. Kuang Ye's mood was very bad today. He brought Ke Hong and the other two and split into 2 directions to look for the citizens who couldn't afford to eat in Crimson City. Unfortunately, they didn't find any. There were as many factories as there were hairs on a cow in Crimson City, and there were also many jobs. As long as one had the strength to survive, one could live a good life after suffering a little. As for those who didn't work, they had long been sent to the labor camp by the police. This wasn't done because of the southern Ming observation group, but because it had always been one of the rules. In Yang Qindong's words, some people needed to be taught a lesson. If they didn't teach them a lesson, they wouldn't know how precious their freedom. The facts also proved that Yang Qindong's ruthless methods were correct. Once someone was identified as a lazy person, the local resident committee would report it. Once it was reported twice in a row, the police would take action and arrest them on the grounds of laziness and send them to the labor camp. Although this was a bit unreasonable, the effect was good. Because after these people were released, they became diligent. Compared to not being able to get money and freedom after working in the labor camp, it was better to work hard after being released. At least they not only had freedom, but they could also use the money they earned. Under such a policy, it was naturally impossible for Kuang Yi to find the kind of people he mentioned. But only one day had passed. Kuang Yi wasn't discouraged. He decided to continue his search. On this night, when everyone gathered in the hotel to eat dinner, Yu Qian and Xin Yu came again. During the day, the two didn't appear and didn't accompany anyone to look at any place. They were completely free. After a day of observation and visit, they believed that the Southern Ming observation group should have a basic understanding of Crimson City, so they appeared again. When they appeared this time, the two gave the Southern Ming observation group a big gift, which was 370,000 Yang coins. Previously, in order to welcome the Southern Ming observation group, Yang Qindong took out 5 million silver and 370,000 Yang coins. The silver was used to entertain, such as food and accommodation, in the end, had to be paid to the Yang Qindong. Although these were all Yang Qindong's businesses, it was equivalent to putting his left hand into his right pocket. This was also to prevent people from reaching out their hands. The silver was used to entertain, but the Yang coins were to be given to the observation group. So when Yu Qian and Xin Yu said that as long as they were in the observation group, regardless of age or status, everyone would receive 100 Yang coins, many young people jumped up in excitement. Unlike the Southern Ming officials, these young people didn't have any intention to nitpick. They were here to broaden their horizons and have fun. Today many people went to the Yang family's department store because the things there were the most complete and the best in the entire Crimson City. After arriving at the Yang family's department store, they really saw a lot of things that they liked. Especially the exquisite watches that could keep track of time, as well as the bicycles and electric scooters. They couldn't bear to part with them and were unwilling to put them down. Unfortunately, these things couldn't be bought with silver, they needed Yang coins. When they were really worried about what to do, Yu Qian and Xin Yu came and gave them Yang coins. How could they not be happy? Although they couldn't buy anything with 100 Yang coins, they could borrow it from others. In this way, if they gathered together, it would be a large sum of money and they could buy the things they liked. So after Yu Qian and Xin Yu announced this decision, they jumped up in joy. Then, whether it was their parents or grandparents who came with them, they all asked to borrow Yang coins. The officials who only cared about learning and watching the changes in Crimson City didn't know the importance of Yang coins. When they saw their family members asking for it, they didn't pay much attention and took out the 100 Yang coins that they had just received. After the young people received the Yang coins, they were naturally elated. They were all overjoyed. Tomorrow they could go to the Yang family's department store and buy the things they liked. After Yu Qian and Xin Yu saw that the staff had finished distributing the coins, they continued, "Everyone, tomorrow you can go to any factory in Qixin City other than the palace, even the military barracks. If you are willing to go, you can also go to any factory in the city. However, you must apply a day in advance. If you want to go, you can tell our staff later. After the necessary registration, you can go to any place you want to go tomorrow." Is this true? The Minister of Personnel, Qin Sun, immediately stood up from his seat. He wanted to go to the city lord's manor to take a look today and see how they dealt with the ordinary affairs and the selection and promotion of officials. However, considering that this should be a secret, he didn't ask. He didn't expect Yang Qindong to take the initiative to think about it for them. Of course it's true. As I said, other than the palace you can go to any place you want to visit and inspect. Yu Qian nodded heavily. He was also amazed by Yang Qindong's breadth of mind. Thinking about the ancient people, if they had any skills, which one of them didn't hide it, afraid that others would learn it and steal their rice bowls? How could there be someone like Yang Qindong, who would open up everything for you to see and let you learn? As for the palace not being open, it wasn't that there was anything special in the palace. It was just that Yang Qindong didn't want his place to be seen by others. That would be very awkward. Compared to the great Ming dynasty's palace, there wasn't much difference, so it was better not to see it. Qin Sun was very satisfied with this answer. He immediately called the staff over and added the word City Lord's Manor. On the other side, Kuang Yi also quickly found the staff and added the words barracks. The other officials also applied according to their own preferences and interests. After knowing that the application form would be quickly approved and sent to their rooms, and that they could enter as they wished the next morning, all of the Southern Ming officials had a satisfied look on their faces. They didn't know that the reason why Yang Qindong dared to show them those things was that he had already regarded them as Yang Xie's future officials and people. Since everyone would be a family in the future, what was the big deal about seeing what a family looked like in advance? That night, whether it was the officials or their family members, they were all very satisfied. Even the people who went to the night market at night decreased a lot. Obviously, they all wanted to have a good night's sleep so that they would have the energy to go to the goal they had set. After Yu Qian and Xin Yu completed the task, they sent someone to report the results to Yang Qindong. There was only one answer they got. Although they showed them Yang coins were absolutely not allowed to be exchanged. Even if the officials came to the door in the name of catching up, they were not allowed to exchange in private. Whoever dared to violate the rules would be severely punished. The reason why they weren't allowed to exchange silver for Yang coins was because of Yang Qindong's small scheme. He was still counting on Yang coins to attract these officials. If they really exchanged Yang coins, then everything would be meaningless. Yang Qindong had already heard about the private exchange of Yang coins from Jianghu. Some Yangxia officials, because of their large families and businesses, needed more money to support them. They couldn't be corrupt, but they were very lustful. They married a lot of wives and had a lot of children. Their lives were a bit tight. Taking out the Yang coins from their monthly salary to exchange for silver was undoubtedly the best way to make money. Chapter 1637. In the market, the exchange ratio between Yang dollars and silver had already reached a point that people could only look up to. Moreover, there was still a demand but no supply. Therefore, as long as one was willing to exchange Yang dollars, one would get a lot of silver and not have to worry about living. Usually Yang Qindong would pretend that he didn't see it. After all, who didn't encounter an emergency? However, now that the Southern Ming observation group had arrived, the exchange business had to be stopped. At least, this level was not allowed to exist. This way, he didn't have to worry about the Southern Ming officials being able to satisfy his requests and wishes. With Yang Qindong's instructions, Yang Wu accepted the order and left. However, he knew that the exchange business would be over before tonight. After all, this was an order personally given by Bugnam of Gojoseon. Once violated, even if there were a few heads, it wouldn't be enough to chop off. Even so, who would take the initiative to seek death? The Southern Ming officials didn't know that by the time they realized the importance of Yang dollars, everything was already too late. Just like when Jing, a fellow member of the brocade guard who came with the observation group, after learning about Yang Bai, he immediately arranged for a fast boat to leave Chichen City and go straight to the capital of the Southern Ming dynasty. He had long heard that there were many good things in the Yang family's department store and that Yang Bai was not the only one who could buy them. In the past he didn't have it. Now that he had it, he had to gather it and buy the things that he couldn't afford in the past. Unfortunately, by the time he got Zhu Qizhen's imperial edict, everything would be too late. The next morning, whether it was the officials or their family members, after a hurried breakfast, they left the Yang family Grand Hotel and went straight to the place they had set their sights on. Qin Sun went to the city lord's residence. When Qin Sun and a group of Southern Ming officials successfully entered the city lord's residence with the application form, they saw the orderly scene of Yang Xie's staff running back and forth in the building. Unlike the Southern Ming court, the officials here walked with the wind. Many times their footsteps were hurried or jogged. They all looked very busy. Compared to the Southern Ming officials who walked with steady steps, it was completely different. This way you can train your body and also improve your work efficiency. After all, Yang Xie has dozens of provinces and regions under his control. There are many things that he has to deal with every day. The person in charge of accompanying them was an official sent by the city lord mansion. After seeing everyone's puzzled expression, he explained. I see. Qin Sun and the others nodded. They actually wanted to be busy, but they only had the Southern Ming kingdom. Moreover, after losing Yunnan, Guizhou and Guangxi, the area under their control was even smaller. They were no longer as busy as before. Even if they wanted to be busy, they couldn't. Because it was said before that everyone could look at the city lord's mansion, but they could not disturb the normal work here, so Qin Sun and the others had to walk together and not be separated. Otherwise, the city lord's mansion would send a large number of officials to explain and accompany them, which in itself was not a small amount of pressure. Fortunately, this request was acceptable to everyone. In fact, they were already very satisfied to be able to come in and take a look. Who would ask for more? What's that? Qin Sun, who was walking in the crowd, noticed that a black thing suddenly rang. Then he saw someone walk forward to pick it up and say something. But there was clearly nothing in front of that person. There was only a wall. Who was he talking to? Not only Qin Sun but some of the Southern Ming Kingdom's officials also noticed it, but they didn't dare to ask casually because of their low status. Now that the minister took the lead, the others naturally became interested. Oh, that's a telephone. Every telephone has its own number and corresponds to a department. If you need to find someone, you don't have to go far to the city lord's mansion. You just need to call this number and say who you are looking for. The accompanying official said proudly, then looked at the Southern Ming Kingdom's officials with a trace of disdain. He was clearly saying that they were a group of bumpkins. In fact, more than a month ago when the telephone was first set up, his reaction was not much better than these Southern Ming Kingdom's officials after learning about its function. He was also dumbfounded. So powerful. Can this old man give it a try? Qin Sun's face was full of surprise, but there was a trace of disbelief in his words. Of course you can, as long as no one is using the telephone. The accompanying official smiled at Qin Sun. He probably also knew that this person was the Minister of Personnel of the Southern Ming Kingdom and was also a high-ranking official. Perhaps after the Yangxia annexed the southern Ming kingdom, everyone would be colleagues. The other party might even be his superior, so his attitude was quite good. At this time, the person who answered the phone put down the phone and walked out of the office. It was obvious that he had something to do or convey. Looking at the empty black phone, Chin Sun was eager to give it a try. Chin Sun, no one is using it right now. You can give it a try, the accompanying official said with an encouraging tone. Then I'll give it a try. Chin Sun straightened his body and walked straight to the telephone, as if he had made a decision. Behind him and beside him were a group of southern Ming Kingdom's officials. Obviously, everyone was very interested. Under everyone's expectant gaze, Chin Sun came in front of the black telephone and reached out with his trembling hand to pick up the phone. However, he quickly put it down again. When everyone was confused, Chin Sun asked a question that made everyone burst out laughing. How do I use this thing? Cough. The accompanying official forcefully suppressed his laughter and quickly explained, Chin Sun, shake it first, then pick up the phone and just say who you are looking for. Of course, the prerequisite is that you know which department the other party is from. Okay, then I'll look for Yu Gong. He's the city lord of the City Lord Mansion, right? When he thought of Yu Qian's self-introduction, Chin Sun had a target. He reached out to the telephone again and picked it up first. Then he shook the black telephone. When he felt the voice coming from the other side, he opened his mouth and said, I'm looking for City Lord Yu Qian. Okay, please wait a moment. The person who answered the phone hesitated for a moment. After all, Yu Qian was very busy with work and not just anyone could find him. However, when he saw that the call was from the City Lord Mansion, he didn't think much of it. Immediately, a pleasant and polite female voice sounded, Okay, please wait a moment. Then there was a beeping sound from the phone. After about 2 breaths, there was another beeping sound. Just when Chin Sun was about to question whether the phone could be used, Yu Qian's authoritative voice came from the other side. Hello, I'm Yu Qian. Who are you? Chin Sun was very familiar with Yu Qian's voice. Therefore, when he heard the voice, he was sure that he had found the right person. However, he was also shocked and didn't know what to say for a moment. Obviously, when the call went through, he was shocked. Hello, who are you? I'm Yu Qian. Why are you looking for me? Yu Qian's energetic voice came from the other side of the phone again. Because the phone had been moved away from Chin Sun's ear, the voice that came from the other side of the phone could be heard clearly even by the people outside. After recognizing that it was indeed Yu Qian's voice, everyone had a look of amazement on their faces. With Yu Qian's continuous questioning, Chin Sun finally woke up. He quickly put the phone to his ear and said, Sir Yu, I'm Chin Sun. Oh, Sir Chin. After a slight hesitation, Yu Qian's laughter came out. Obviously, he had already guessed the purpose of the other party's call. Obviously, he didn't believe in the function of this phone and wanted to try it himself. After laughing, Yu Qian didn't say too much. He only said that he would go to the hotel to chat with Chin Sun after work today. Then he put down the phone. The beeping sound was already heard from the phone. Chin Sun reluctantly put it down, then shook his head and said with a sigh, This thing is really good. It can save a lot of time to find people, and it can also improve the efficiency of work. By the way, I wonder where this phone can reach? As long as it's a place with a telephone line, you can reach it. For example, this phone can reach any place in Raymen City with a telephone. The escort explained patiently. And all of the southern Ming officials were even more amazed. Think about it, if this was really the case, then the entire southern Ming dynasty could be connected by phone. Wouldn't that mean that the emperor could find whoever he wanted? How much work efficiency would be improved? It was simply unimaginable. Forget it. Chin Sun was excited and wanted to ask if this phone could be set up in the southern Ming dynasty, but he quickly gave up on this idea. Yang Qindong was no longer the Yang Qindong from before. In terms of strength, he was far more powerful than the southern Ming dynasty. Why would he listen to him and set up a telephone line for the southern Ming dynasty? This was clearly impossible to achieve. Raymen City Military Camp. Kuang Yi brought some southern Ming officials who were curious about the strength of the 5-star army and appeared outside the door. After showing the application form, everyone was escorted into the military camp by a lieutenant colonel. Just like the city lord's mansion, the arrival of the observation group didn't affect the work of the soldiers here. They were training and doing what they were supposed to do. Kuang Yi had his own ideas. He wanted to see what the 5-star officers were doing every day and how the soldiers at the bottom were trained. To meet these requirements, this military camp could satisfy all of his requirements. Kuang Yi had his own ideas. He wanted to see what the 5-star officers were doing every day. At the same time, he wanted to see how the soldiers at the bottom were trained. This military camp could satisfy all of his requirements. Chapter 1638. After entering the military camp, on a flat ground, a group of 5-star soldiers wearing vests were undergoing training for a 500-meter special obstacle course. Although it was already November because of the unique climate of Crimson City, it was still very warm. Especially under the training, the soldiers were sweating a lot, so they were wearing very cool clothes. What a disgrace! Kuang Yi said angrily when he saw the soldiers' attire. The southern Ming dynasty's army was very strict about appearance. Even during training, they paid attention to the attire because it represented the face of the country. Since when did they dress so casually like the 5-star army? Although this simple attire could allow the body to relax, the generals didn't dare to do this during training. If anyone dared to do this, they would be impeached by the civil officials and be heavily punished. This was the fundamental difference between two different systems. Kuang Yi said angrily. Clearly his education didn't allow soldiers to do this. However, this was the 5-star army's barracks, so he couldn't question it. On the other hand, Kahong and the others behind him were deep in thought. Kahong had led soldiers before, and at the highest level he was a vice Jianghu. Therefore he was very clear about what the soldiers needed. Not to mention the difference between the 5-star army's training and theirs, just this casual training was enough to make people envious. As the saying goes, every field has its own specialization. Soldiers should train in the most relaxed environment, and not be limited by their attire, which would affect the results of the training. Of course, this was only what he thought. Without orders, no one dared to do this. Therefore, Kahong was a bit envious of the soldiers who were training. The 500-meter obstacle course. It trained a person's stamina, endurance, agility, strength, and coordination. Later generations had already proven that this was a very scientific training method. And now, the soldiers who were at the lowest level had to go through this kind of basic training if they wanted to become a soldier of the 5-star army. It was also through this kind of training that the soldiers' bodies were greatly strengthened. On the battlefield, not only could they kill more enemies, but they could also protect their own safety. On both sides of the training ground, there were 2 temporary shelters. In each shelter there were 2 military doctors wearing white coats. Beside them, there was a large water jug with drinks that could relieve the heat. This was to ensure that the soldiers could quickly replenish themselves when they were short of water. Not far away there were specialized examiners. They were holding pen and paper to record the soldiers' performance. This was to ensure that the outstanding people would be promoted, the qualified people would stay, and the unqualified people would be kicked out. In fact, after a period of time, there would always be soldiers who were fired. Of course, they wouldn't directly withdraw from the military camp and return to being civilians. Most of them would be sent to the police force to continue their duties for the safety of the people. Only a very few people would return to being civilians because of their poor quality. This way they could maintain the absolute strength of the 5-star army. This was also the reason why the 5-star army was so famous. Every time there was a recruitment drive, young civilians would fight to join the army. If it was during the recruitment drive, no one would dare to do so. The reason for this was, in Yang Qindong's words, sweat more during training and bleed less during war. If one knew that they could not do it but still sent them to the battlefield, it would be a sign of irresponsibility for their lives. If these words were said by someone else, there would definitely be a lot of doubts. However, it was completely different when it was said by Yang Qindong. It was the absolute truth. Not to mention, the soldiers selected from this military camp were not ordinary soldiers. There was a high chance that they would enter the Cold Vanguard Army in the future. Naturally, the selection process would be stricter. Kuang Yi could not swallow his pride, so he asked Kahong and the others to ask in detail. When they learned more about the situation from the medical officer, the recording personnel, and the security personnel, when they reported it to Kuang Yi, it could be seen that everyone's expression was somewhat unsightly. After all, the 5-star army was a potential enemy of the southern Ming Empire. The stronger they were, the more uneasy the enemy would feel. Let's go and take a look at the other places. Kuang Yi's face darkened. He turned and walked towards the interior of the military camp. He had heard the sound of guns just now, so he wanted to see what the 5-star army was doing. This was a shooting range. Hundreds of soldiers who had become qualified Cold Vanguard Army soldiers were doing target practice here. With regards to Kuang Yi's arrival, regardless of whether it was the commander or the ordinary soldiers, they acted as if they did not see him. They continued to aim, fire, report the targets, and record. When he heard the results of the report, Kuang Yi's expression became even uglier. He turned his head and nodded at Kahong. The latter nodded in agreement. Then he jogged to the side of a recording personnel and humbly asked for guidance. May I ask, how often do you guys do target practice like this? Aren't you guys wasting gunpowder like this? If it was someone else who asked this, the recording personnel would definitely think that the person was an idiot. This was because everyone in the military camp knew that the munitions factory in Crimson City could produce more than 100,000 bullets every day. In order to improve the military quality of the soldiers, target practice was only a form of training. It was to allow the soldiers to reduce casualties on the battlefield and kill more enemies. How could there be a waste of gunpowder? However, when they saw that the person asking the question was from the Southern Ming Empire's observation team, they immediately understood that it was a country bumpkin asking questions. Right now, in the eyes of the Yangxia staff, the Southern Ming Empire was a country bumpkin. Not long ago, the great Ming Empire's high and mighty aura no longer existed. In other words, they were looking down on the great Ming Empire. Just like in history when China was lagging behind, they were looked down upon by others. This was especially so for the Westerners. Backwardness and poverty were synonymous with China. They had already forgotten that when we built cities with millions of people in Bianliang and Hangzhou, the largest city in Europe, Venice, only had a population of 100,000. Moreover, whether it was the nobles or the commoners, they all urinated and defecated on the streets. Their civilization was far behind ours. However, reality was reality. If you were lagging behind, you would be beaten up. This was an absolute truth. If you were lagging behind, you would be looked down upon. Fortunately, due to the previous discipline, the Southern Ming Empire's officials could still maintain a humble attitude on the surface. Therefore, the recording personnel replied with a good attitude, "It won't be a waste. If you don't train your marksmanship well, how can you kill enemies on the battlefield?" Ko Hong, who had clearly seen himself as a part of the enemy, had an unsightly expression on his face. In the end, he could only awkwardly smile and retreat. Then he sent the same words back to Kuang Yi. At this moment, his expression became even darker. After leaving the shooting range, they went to the army headquarters a few kilometers away. There they saw a scene that they would never forget. In a meeting room that was thousands of square meters, a huge sand table stood there. On it was a three-dimensional map of the Southern Ming Empire. On the sand table, the rivers, lakes, mountains, roads, cities and cities of the Southern Ming Empire were displayed one by one. It was as if a three-dimensional map of the Southern Ming Empire was presented in front of everyone. After seeing the sand table, Kuang Yi finally couldn't hold it in anymore. He impulsively strode forward as if he wanted to flip the sand table over. Two young staff officers had been paying attention to Kuang Yi for a long time. They immediately went forward to stop him and forcefully pushed him to the side. This also caused Ko Hong and the others to become restless. They shouted and went straight to Kuang Yi. However, the commotion had already attracted the attention of the soldiers who were in charge of guarding outside the door. A squad of soldiers rushed out and pointed their guns at Ko Hong and the others. They had no choice but to stop moving forward. The pitch-black muzzles were aimed at the hundreds of people in the Southern Ming Empire's observation group. It was clear that if anyone dared to make a move, they would shoot to death. Ko Hong and the others stood rooted to the ground. Layers of cold sweat appeared on their heads. They didn't doubt that the other party would dare to shoot. After all, this was the Yangxia's army headquarters. It was equivalent to the Southern Ming Empire's Ministry of War. If anyone wanted to cause trouble here, they would have to pay extremely serious consequences. Everyone didn't dare to move. Someone had already reported what happened here. Soon, Deputy Commander-in-Chief Lung Song led a group of officers into the war room. He already knew what had happened on the way here. He also found an opportunity to call Yang Qindong to ask for instructions. After receiving an answer, he entered with full confidence. As soon as Lung Song entered the war room, Kuang Yi shouted loudly as if he had seen his savior. "I protest. I protest that you treat the Southern Ming Empire as an imaginary enemy. You must remove this sand table model and apologize to us immediately." Kuang Yi had met Lung Song at the welcome banquet. The two of them even chatted for a while. At that time, Kuang Ye's mentality was still relatively relaxed. He even seemed a little arrogant. On the other hand, Lung Song's attitude was very humble. Most of the time, it was Kuang Yi talking while he listened. This created an illusion that Lung Song was Kuang Ye's subordinate. How could he have known that Lung Song would have such an attitude? It was only because he respected Kuang Yi as a senior. In addition, he also knew that the sixth young master and Sir Kuang had a good personal relationship in the past. That was why he kept enduring. However, this didn't mean that Lung Song was really afraid. Especially after he had already called Yang Qindong to ask for instructions, he was even more confident. Chapter 1639. Imaginary enemy? Huang Gong, since you said so yourself, why did you do something so inappropriate? As the saying goes, if you don't do anything wrong, don't be afraid of ghosts calling at night. Could it be that you want to be enemies with our 5-star army, so you're afraid that we'll be enemies with you? Let me tell you, your actions have already violated your status as a member of the observer group. You're too reckless and you'll have to pay the price for it. Men, chase Huang Gong and all of the South Ming Ministry of War officials out. The Navy has already arranged a transport ship, and they must leave Crimson City today. After saying this in an unquestionable manner, a group of officers immediately began to carry it out. Because not all of the Ministry of War officials and their families were here, they had to search for them. Then they would be kicked out of Crimson City. Huang Yi clearly didn't expect that he would end up with such a result after making a ruckus. At this moment, his expression changed greatly and he shouted, "No! You can't not do this, it's too unfair. I want to see Yang Qindong, I want to see Bugnam of Gojoseon. Our king doesn't have time to see you. Also, have you forgotten the bet from before? Let me tell you, there are no civilians in Crimson City who can't afford to eat, because there are countless jobs waiting for them. Therefore you lost, and with your actions today, there's no other choice but to leave. Alright, do it." Lung Song didn't have any intention to continue talking with Huang Yi. After saying this, he turned and left, leaving behind a few officers to deal with this sudden situation. Regardless of whether he was willing or not, Huang Yi was dragged out of the camp in the end. Kahong and the others also followed behind. All of them had ugly expressions. None of them had expected that they would be sent back after only 3 days. How shameful would that be? Everything was because of their minister's impulsive actions. However, they couldn't do anything. The situation was stronger than the person. If they dared to make a move against the 5-star army, it was equivalent to a challenge and they were seeking their own deaths. No one could save them. They didn't dare to get angry at Huang Yi. He was their superior and his words determined their future. Anger that couldn't be vented was the scariest. Until they boarded the ship, no one said a word, but everyone's face was filled with anger, and they were in a bad mood. Especially soon, the family members of the officials from the Ministry of War were also found and sent to the ships. They didn't care so much, especially some of the young people. They were happily strolling around Crimson City. Some of them were even strolling around Yang family's department store, wanting to buy something they liked. Suddenly, many soldiers from the 5-star army rushed out and brought them here. They were still confused about what had happened. Now that they finally knew the truth, how could they not be furious? In their anger, they didn't care about Huang Yi's status as a high-ranking official. They all started shouting on the ship. Although they didn't directly name Huang Yi, their words were full of criticism. Do they want to die? When Kohong and the others heard this, they were all filled with righteous indignation. They rolled up their sleeves and wanted to find trouble with those young people. They couldn't do anything to the 5-star army, but they could still take care of their own juniors. Forget it, let them vent their anger. At this time, Huang Yi had already calmed down and shook his head. He was already regretting his impulsive actions. But now that things had come to this, there was no other way. Even if he was willing to bend down and apologize, the 5-star army wouldn't accept it. Not to mention, it was impossible for him to apologize to the 5-star army. Because in Huang Yi's eyes, Yang Qindong was already a traitor. He was the imperial tutor of the crown prince, the minister of war, and a rank 1 official. How could he lower his head to a traitor? When Kohong and the others heard Huang Yi say that they could vent their anger, they couldn't help but look at Huang Yi. Of course they hoped that this was true. If that was the case, they would each give their own minister of war a punch to vent their anger. But how could they dare to do that? They wanted to go back just like that. They originally had more time to understand the situation of the 5-star army, but now everything was gone. A good opportunity to understand their opponent was lost just like that. Everyone's morale was low, and they all leaned against the ship with their heads lowered. It was worth mentioning that this time, the transport ship wasn't the luxurious one from before. It was just an ordinary ship. Yang Xie's explanation was that the incident happened too suddenly and there wasn't enough time to deploy the ship, so they just had to make do. There wasn't even a single room for them to rest in. Everyone was squeezed in the cabin, and after a long time, there were all kinds of smells. It would be strange if they felt good. But what could they do? This was all Huang Yi's own fault, so he couldn't blame anyone else. The news that Huang Yi and all the officials and family members of the Ministry of War were sent away quickly spread throughout the observer group. Regardless of whether it was the officials or their family members, they all rushed back to the Yang family hotel as soon as they heard the news. Then, after a few discussions, the ministers began to restrain the people accompanying them, telling them to pay attention to their attitude and actions. This wasn't the Southern Ming dynasty but Crimson City. They were only a few guests, and if something went wrong they might even become criminals. For everyone's safety, everyone had to exercise restraint. The family members cooperated, which was rare. No one made a fuss. They could tell that living in Crimson City was like living in heaven. Who would want to ruin such a good life? Therefore, as soon as the officials spoke, the family members expressed that they would do their best to cooperate. There were even some who spoke ill of Kuang Yi, thinking that he had embarrassed the Southern Ming dynasty. There were quite a few people with such opinions and attitudes. She really didn't know what Kuang Yi would think if he were to hear these words. Wang Jiqing and Wang Shang also returned to the Yang family hotel. They didn't pay much attention to the fact that the Ministry of War was kicked out of Crimson City. They just needed to control their words and actions. Of course, the reason why they didn't pay attention to it was because the siblings were arguing about what to buy. This matter completely attracted the attention of the two people. The younger sister, Wang Shang, thought that buying a bicycle with Yang coins was already very good. For this, she was willing to give up the latest cosmetics and the exquisite little mirror. She only wanted a bicycle to bring back to the Southern Ming dynasty. She would be able to ride it every day, and her other sisters would definitely be envious of her. Wang Jiqing had a different opinion on this matter. He thought that if they were going to buy something, they should buy the best one. He was interested in a bicycle that could move on its own without any manual labor. This was a heaven-defying existence. Bringing it back to the capital of the Southern Ming dynasty would be an extremely awe-inspiring thing. Brother, that won't do. Let's not talk about the fact that a bicycle costs 3,000 Yang coins. We simply can't afford it. Even if the Southern Ming dynasty doesn't have electricity, how many times can we ride it back? Wang Shang saw that Wang Jiqing had already sunk into his own fantasy world and couldn't extricate himself, so she could only pour a bucket of cold water over him. Ah! Wang Jiqing suddenly reacted as if he had been struck by lightning. He stood there motionless for a long time. Wang Shang was scared out of her wits. She walked over and waved her hand in front of her brother's eyes. When she saw that he was unmoved, she used her slender hands to gently push her brother's body. Only then did he let out a long sigh. Aya, why doesn't the Southern Ming dynasty have electricity? Isn't our great Ming dynasty the most outstanding nation in the world? Isn't it said that we have the best environment and the strongest culture? But why isn't there even electricity? What's the point of talking about being advanced and powerful? At this moment, Wang Jiqing started to ramble. He didn't care if anyone answered his questions. He only cared about throwing out questions one after another. Wang Shang, who was standing at the side, was very clear-headed. She also sighed. Yes, before she came to Crimson City, she still felt that the Southern Ming dynasty was very powerful. No matter how strong the Bugnam of Gojoseon and the Five-Star Army were, they still wouldn't be a match for the Southern Ming dynasty. But now her mentality had long been shaken. In Wang Shang's eyes, Crimson City was heaven on earth. Compared to it, the capital of the Southern Ming dynasty was a backwater and poor place. She couldn't help but yearn for life in Crimson City. She was already fantasizing about whether she could stay here. If that was the case, how great would that be? Wang Shang and Wang Jiqing weren't the only ones whose mentality had changed. Many others had similar thoughts. And this was only the third day since they came to Crimson City. To be precise, it was only the second day after they truly understood Crimson City. Kuang Ye's incident reminded everyone. In the following days, the observation team members were much more well-behaved when they walked around Crimson City. After all, with such good conditions, no one was willing to leave immediately. Thus they couldn't do anything stupid. Kuang Yi and the others didn't even understand the deployment of the Five-Star Army's forces. They also didn't know how many soldiers the Five-Star Army had before they were chased away. But who could be blamed for this? As the saying goes, the evils brought on by oneself are the hardest to bear. With this as an example, the Southern Ming observation team became even more well-behaved. They didn't do anything that crossed the line. But even so, the scenes they saw made them widen their eyes in disbelief. The scenes made them feel as if they were in a dream. The spacious cement roads in the city, the neat streets, the lush green trees, the rosy-cheeked people, and the high-spirited new army were all things that he didn't even dare to dream about. Chapter 1640. Everyone had something to do and money to earn. Children didn't care about their birth. As long as one of their parents was Han, they could receive a good education from a young age. When people fell ill, they had money to treat them. The greatest guarantee was the possibility of dying from illness. One day they had 3 meals instead of 2. Not only that, they could eat meat for every meal. Everyone had new clothes to wear. This seemed to be something that only humans dreamed of in the immortal world. But now, everything was happening in Crimson City. Those bright windows were something that even the great Ming Imperial Palace didn't have the money to install. But here it was extremely common. There were also towel factories, flour factories, soy sauce factories, monosodium glutamate factories, mosquito-repellent incense factories, textile factories, cigarette factories, pharmaceutical factories, paper factories, ceramics factories, steel factories, power plants, bullet factories, chemical factories, power plants, munitions factories, furniture factories, garment factories, cement factories, glass factories, and so on. Wherever he went, he was shocked, and it was the kind of shock that went straight to the bottom of his heart. He really didn't know that the world could be so beautiful until he arrived in Crimson City. The Southern Ming Empire's observation team was still in Crimson City. Everything that happened here overturned their previous understanding. In the capital of Southern Ming, Kuang Yi had already returned with the officials of the Ministry of War and close to 2,000 people. As soon as he entered the city, a eunuch came to pass a decree that the emperor wanted to see Kuang Yi. After tidying up his clothes, the travel-worn Kuang Yi entered the imperial palace and knelt in front of Zhu Qizhen. The great Ming Empire was very empathetic towards its officials. They didn't have to kneel when they saw the emperor. But this time Kuang Yi felt that he had done something wrong. This kneel represented his intention to ask for forgiveness. "Grand Tutor, why are you here? Please rise." Zhu Qizhen was an emperor who knew how to act. At this moment, the concern he expressed made Kuang Yi feel very moved. This time he wanted to kneel even more and not get up. "Your Majesty, this subject is incompetent and has failed to live up to your trust. I was thrown out by that bastard Wunan Wang." Abruptly, he kowtowed to the ground and his forehead came into close contact with the ground. "Quickly help the Grand Tutor up." When Zhu Qizhen saw that Kuang Yi's forehead was starting to redden, he hurriedly shouted. Soon after, the head eunuch, Qian Sengbao, stepped forward and helped Kuang Yi up. Kuang Yi stood up with tears in his eyes. No one knew how much pressure he had endured on the way back. Almost everyone was blaming him. In the beginning, Kahong and the others would still speak up for him, but later on, these people were too lazy to speak up for him, so everyone vented their anger on him. If it weren't for the fact that the embroidered uniform guards were with him, he might have been thrown off the boat and thrown into the sea to feed the fish. His actions made his opponent, Bugnam of Gojoseon Yang Qindong, unhappy, but he accepted it. But now even his own people didn't like him. This was really intolerable to him, causing him to have thoughts of suicide. Now that he finally saw Zhu Qizhen, the only person who still believed in him, he cried like a child. Although the embroidered uniform guards had already sent back a message explaining why Kuang Yi came back first, it wasn't very detailed. Now that the real person was in front of him, Zhu Qizhen naturally had to ask clearly. He said, "Someone give the Grand Tutor a seat." After slowly sitting down, Kuang Yi's mood gradually calmed down. In the end, under Zhu Qizhen's questioning, he recounted what had happened to him, as well as what had happened to the majority of the Southern Ming Empire's observation group. He especially described Yang Qindong's warm reception in great detail. In the end, Kuang Yi said in a tearful voice, "Your Majesty, that brat Yang Hodong is clearly buying people's hearts. It can be imagined that the officials who went this time might not be bought over by him, but as the saying goes, if you take someone else's hand, you will be blinded. I'm afraid that in the following matters, they will be on Bugnam of Gojoseon's side. We have to guard against them." Zhu Qizhen listened to the details from beginning to end and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Although Kuang Yi wasn't a person who was good at telling stories from his words, one could still feel that Yang Qindong must have put in a lot of effort to receive the Southern Ming Empire's observation group. In addition, Yang Xia was indeed very powerful now. As the saying goes, a good official chooses a tree to nest in. He didn't dare to guarantee what would happen in the future. Has Crimson City really become so powerful? After thinking about it, Zhu Qizhen still asked with a trace of doubt. "Yes. Because this official's time was still too short, I'm afraid that I only saw the rough outline. The specifics should be more powerful than this official said." In this matter, although Kuang Yi didn't want to admit it, the truth was the truth. He had no choice but to speak the truth. This is really difficult to handle," Zhu Qizhen said with a difficult expression. Just as Kuang Yi said, the officials in the observation group could have been influenced by Yang Qindong. It wasn't impossible for them to have been bribed. However, without any real evidence, he could not just cut them off and do anything to the members of the observation group. There were 3,000 to 4,000 officials in the observation group, accounting for 1/3 of the officials in the Southern Ming Empire. In terms of influence, because the ranks of the officials weren't low, the lowest was at least a fifth-rank official. Therefore their influence was even greater. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that they influenced more than half of the officials. Without any evidence, it wasn't difficult to imagine the consequences of making a move on them. If this was really the case before the five-star army attacked, the southern Ming Empire would be in chaos. If this was really the case, the result was definitely not something that Zhu Qizhan and the southern Ming Empire could accept. If they couldn't capture people and couldn't make a move, what should they do next? At this moment, Zhu Qizhan had a headache. Naturally, Kuang Yi didn't have any better ideas. He had to face 3,000 to 4,000 officials. That was a huge group. His fellow countrymen, colleagues in the same department, as well as those who were related to his interests or were related to him by marriage. This group was so powerful that it was possible for them to overthrow the southern Ming dynasty if they were not careful. Facing such a huge force, even the emperor couldn't do anything. This was because even during the time of Zhu Yuanzhang, the founder of the Ming dynasty, although he killed many officials and corrupt officials, he still didn't dare to make a move against 3,000 to 4,000 officials at once. How about the emperor give a decree and have them come back? Then, send someone to communicate with them and make sure they don't talk nonsense. Then we'll wait and see what happens. Kuang Yi could only come up with this idea. That's the only way. I'll write the decree in a bit. Before Zhu Qizhan could think of a better idea, he could only say this. Then, as if he had thought of something, he asked, "That's right, Grand Tutor said that he went to the five-star army's headquarters. What did he see? In your opinion, if the southern Ming Empire and the five-star army go to war, what are our chances of winning?" This was what Zhu Qizhan wanted to know the most. History had always been like this. When political means couldn't solve a problem, only war could decide the outcome. At that time, the winner would be king and the loser would be in the wrong. If the southern Ming Empire had a higher chance of winning, Zhu Qizhan would have to consider mobilizing troops. This could be considered as striking first to gain the upper hand. When he looked at Kuang Yi with anticipation, he was destined to be disappointed. This was because at this moment, the Minister of War lowered his head and didn't dare to look him in the eye. When it came to military matters, there were probably not many people more qualified to speak than him, the Minister of War. Kuang Yi's understanding and control of the military wasn't something that the other ministers of war could compare to. This could be seen from the fact that he spent half a year in the various guard stations. And it was precisely because of this understanding that Kuang Yi felt immense pressure at this moment. Although he had only spent half a day in the five-star army's headquarters, the impression that it had left on him was too deep. Whether it was the training method, the advanced weapons, or the logistical support, the southern Ming army could not compare to them. Over the years, although the southern Ming Empire had invested in the military every year, it wasn't a high proportion. The southern Ming Empire had Baiming in the north, the three provincial kings in the west, and Bugnam of Gojoseon in the south. However, almost all of the officials didn't think that anyone would use force against the southern Ming Empire. Baiming couldn't even protect himself, so if he made a move against the southern Ming Empire, he wouldn't have enough confidence. Facing the pressure of the five-star army, how could the three provincial kings take the initiative to make trouble for the southern Ming Empire? That would be equivalent to seeking death. Only the five-star army posed the greatest threat. However, they had always been active outside of the great Ming Empire's territory and had never taken the initiative to make a move against the southern Ming Empire. Even in the north, Baiming repeatedly made trouble for Yang Qindong, but they didn't retaliate. At most they sent Baiming back. Because of this, almost everyone thought that although the five-star army was strong, they didn't have the strength to make a move against the southern Ming Empire. Since this was the case, the southern Ming Empire would protect itself first and wouldn't invest too much in the military. In their own words, they would sit back and watch their opponent die. They would wait for their opponent to panic and reveal an opening before attacking. It had to be said that the southern Ming Empire's imperial court was a strange existence to place their hopes on their opponent. However, this was the general trend. Ever since Zhu Qizhan lost at the Tumu Castle, he was afraid of war. His request for the army was to just defend their territory and didn't have the ambition to expand their territory. Even the emperor was like this, not to mention the ministers below. Without enough military funds, the southern Ming Empire's army could only muddle through. Because of the embezzlement of some officials, many soldiers who came from military families had problems eating and wearing clothes. Even if they didn't starve to death, they wouldn't be able to survive. Chapter 1641. They hadn't eaten for a long time and didn't have enough nutrition, causing most of the southern Ming soldiers to look like they were emaciated. In comparison, the logistical support of the soldiers of the five-star army was very good. They could get whatever they needed. All of them were tall and sturdy. In addition, they had reasonable training. Most importantly, Yang Qindong valued them highly. Just comparing them to the army, the difference between the two sides was many levels. Not to mention, in terms of equipment, the 5-star army was a pure firearms army. Their firearms could take a person's life from 100 steps away. On the other hand, what about the Southern Ming army? They were still using the most primitive weapons. Even if they had firearms, their strength would be greatly reduced due to lack of training. How could they be a match for the 5-star army? Facing Zhu Qixin's question, Kuang Yi wanted to tell the truth. However, if he did that, it would make the emperor sad and prove that he was incompetent. Thus, after thinking about it, he politely said, "Emperor, if we really fight, I'm afraid that we only have a 50% chance of winning." 50%? If that's the case, then it's 50%. There's nothing to be afraid of. After all, no one can say that they will definitely win. Alright, since it's like this, Grand Tutor, you can go and prepare. As for how much silver you need, I'll give you an order later. Zhu Qixin didn't know that Kuang Yi was comforting him. He really thought that the Southern Ming army was very strong and could fight against the 5-star army. After hearing this, Kuang Yi wanted to explain. However, after thinking about it, he didn't say anything. He found that even if he said anything, it would be useless. Instead, it would make the emperor lose confidence. If that was the case, the Southern Ming army would be in danger. Moreover, there was no evidence that the 5-star army would definitely make a move against them. Just like what the staff officer in the army headquarters of the 5-star army said, there, not only the Southern Ming Empire, but also the topography of any power would be recorded. Perhaps he was thinking too much? With the spirit of IQ in his heart, Kuang Yi left the palace. He didn't even return home and went straight to the Ministry of War. Since the emperor had already said that he wanted to develop the military, he had to plan it well and get the silver first. Crimson City. Today was Yu Qian's day off, so he personally accompanied Qin Sun, Wang Zhua, Xie Chong, Shao Xian, Wei Luo, Shang Lu, and the imperial censor of the left to tour the city. Their destination this time was the Tomb of the Kings, in the eyes of the citizens of Crimson Nest City. The so-called King's Tomb naturally referred to the place where the kings were buried. It referred to the place where the kings of the various countries who were defeated by the 5-star army were placed under house arrest. This was a street near the East City. Looking from afar, one could see that each courtyard was quite large, and there was a king imprisoned in each courtyard. Unlike the other streets, both ends of this street were guarded by 5-star army soldiers. After a rough calculation, there were no less than 1,000 people. This didn't include the police and the 5-star army soldiers patrolling the streets. According to Yu Qian's introduction, there were 2,000 to 3,000 Yang family soldiers responsible for the security of this street. With so many soldiers, it was enough to show how much importance the Yang Xia placed on the Tomb of the Kings. It was also thanks to Yu Qian leading the team today. Otherwise, if the South Ming observation group wanted to go alone, they wouldn't be able to enter. City Lord. Seeing Yu Qian lead a group of people over, most of whom were wearing South Ming official robes, a colonel in charge of security here ran over and gave a standard military salute. "You've worked hard. How about this? We'll go in and take a look. This is the king's token." Yu Qian smiled modestly and took out a golden token with the word Yang on it. "Yes." The colonel walked up and checked the token. After confirming that there was no mistake, he turned around and made a gesture to let them pass. From this, it could be seen that the security here was tight, and even Yu Qian couldn't enter without permission. Seeing this, the left assistant minister of rights Zhou Ziang said with dissatisfaction, "There's no need to be so careful." Facing Zhou Ziang's question, Yu Qian acted like he didn't hear it and continued to walk into the street. Behind him was a group of officials from the Southern Ming Empire's observation group. Not long after entering the street, they saw the first courtyard. Iron bars thicker than fingers replaced the courtyard walls and completely wrapped around the courtyard. The advantage of this was that it could prevent people from escaping, and it could also allow people outside to easily see everything inside, making it easier to monitor. An old man in his 70s was sitting in the courtyard, basking in the sun. When he heard the sound of footsteps and saw Yu Qian leading a group of people outside the courtyard, a trace of guilt flashed across his face, and his face instantly turned red. Even so, he didn't turn around and go back inside. This was because if he didn't say anything or went back without orders, he would be punished according to the Yang Xia law. This punishment wasn't heavy, it was just starvation for 3 days. This old man didn't care at first, but after being starved several times in a row, he finally became obedient. When he saw Yu Qian and the others, although his expression was ugly, he didn't hide inside the house. The old man didn't hide, but Yu Qian had already spoken. "Lily, how are you?" "What? He's the original king of Jianghu Lily? It would have been fine if Yu Qian didn't speak, but once he spoke, it immediately attracted cries of surprise from the South Ming Kingdom's observation group. If they didn't know any of the other kings, they definitely knew who Lily was. Some of the officials had visited Jianghu more than 10 years ago and had seen King Lily. It was just that after more than 10 years things had changed, so they didn't immediately recognize him. Now that Yu Qian called out his name, they carefully identified him. Soon after, Xie Chong was the first to cry out. That's right, he is Lily. This official has seen him before, but I didn't expect him to be so old. Ah. With Minister Xie Chong saying this, how could the other South Ming officials not believe him? At that moment, each of them carefully sized up the old man, but the thoughts in their hearts had already flown off somewhere. Lily naturally heard the cries of surprise from outside. However, this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. In the past, other kings would be locked up on this street from time to time. When they first saw him, they were also surprised. Being surprised once was uncomfortable, but after being surprised many times, it became normal. Lily, who was used to it, didn't have any intention of hiding. Since he had already been recognized, there was no point in hiding. Instead, he took the initiative to walk to the railing and said to Yu Qian, "City Lord Yu, isn't it a little too long for the performance team to only come once a month? This king is really bored staying here. Can you give a reaction and let the performance team perform twice a month?" "Okay, I will report your request to the higher-ups." Yu Qian smiled and agreed, which immediately attracted a wave of gratitude from Lily. The first courtyard was Lily, which attracted the cries of surprise from the South Ming Kingdom's observation group. The second courtyard was the Lansang Kingdom's King Paise. Seeing another king locked up here, everyone deeply understood the true meaning of the king's tomb. At the same time, everyone's cries of surprise weren't as loud. In the next courtyard were King Boromir of the Phnom Penh dynasty, Governor Qin Rong of Luzon, King Li Yong of North Korea, and so on. Among them they also saw the blind Duke of the Ras Duchy. However, because they were too far away, the South Ming Kingdom's officials didn't react. More importantly, in the two courtyards of the king's tomb, everyone saw the three provinces' King Zhu Huiqiu and Shiping's King Mu Bin. Coincidentally, the two of them lived across from each other. Every day when they basked in the sun, the two of them would sit facing each other. It would be very interesting to have two old enemies meet each other every day and not be able to make a move against each other. When the South Ming Kingdom's observation group walked past their courtyard, both Zhu Huiqiu and Mu Bin wanted to turn around and enter the house. However, they didn't dare to because they were already told that they had to stay outside the courtyard until the observation group left. Otherwise they would starve for 3 days. Humans were iron, rice was steel. If they didn't eat a meal, they would panic. The two of them had violated the rules when they first arrived and starved for 3 days. That feeling was really uncomfortable, and they didn't want to experience it again. When the two of them obediently stood there like rare animals in the zoo, all the Southern Ming officials who saw them had a gloomy expression on their faces. It was as if they had eaten rat feces. Their hearts were disgusted and their expressions were extremely ugly. However, there was nothing they could do. The two of them had been defeated by Bugnam of Gojosian fair and square. They had brought this upon themselves. Other people couldn't interfere, nor did they dare to interfere. After walking for nearly 4 hours, they walked out from the other end of the king's tomb. Everyone's expression was different. Hee, there are still some courtyards that are empty, but it doesn't matter. Bugnam of Gojosian said that they will be full one day. Yu Qian seemed to explain very casually. However, when these words were heard by the South Ming Kingdom's officials, they didn't mean that at all. What did he mean by it will be full one day? Could it be that the South Ming Emperor and Bai Ming Emperor were also going to be locked up? It was unknown who it was that muttered this in a low voice. However, because everyone was thinking about something, the scene was extremely quiet. Thus, this sentence was quickly heard by everyone clearly. At this moment, all the officials' faces were filled with shock. They suddenly discovered that this assumption wasn't impossible. Since Yang Xie could defeat so many powerful enemies, why couldn't she deal with the South Ming Kingdom and Bai Ming Emperor? As a part of it, what should they do next? Where should they go? Chapter 1642. The trip this time had dealt a heavy blow to everyone's spirits. So much so that when the officials returned to the Yang family hotel, their faces were still as cold as ice. Yu Qian didn't care about this. He only knew that he had done what he needed to do. As for the rest, he would leave it to their king to deal with. Yang Qindong also learned about Yu Qian's trip to the king's tomb. After hearing Beta Persei's description of the reactions of the Southern Ming officials, he couldn't help but laugh and said, "Good, the fire has already been set up. Let's see how the fire will burn. The Ming observation group was still in Crimson City. During this period of time, they went to many places such as the Yang family school. When these officials saw that the children of the Han people in Crimson City could enter the school for free, they were really shocked. During the Great Ming Dynasty, because the people weren't rich and were exploited by the tyrants, there weren't many people who were literate. Using 1% as a ratio was already a bit exaggerated. Didn't they know that allowing the people to become literate was good for the progress of the people? Of course they knew, but they still prevented this from happening. This was because they wanted to become a powerful group. They needed to have advantages, and literacy was an advantage. But in Crimson City, this kind of restriction didn't exist. All the children of the common people could enter the school for free. If they learned well, they would be used by the Wuxia and become an official. They might even have great power. This was somewhat out of the expectations of the southern Ming officials. How could a grassroots person have power? If that was the case, wouldn't it be a mess? But the Wuxia clearly didn't care about this. The advantage of this was that the common people had culture, knowledge, and the ability to distinguish right from wrong. As long as they worked hard, they could become useful to the society, the country, and the people. In this way, although it was a shock to the powerful, it also allowed the Wuxia to have more talents. They wouldn't encounter bottlenecks and various pressures in the process of development. In fact, there weren't any powerful people in the Wuxia. Everyone relied on their own abilities. This was no longer the era of heroes and heroes of the father and son. He had to admit that there were more benefits to doing this. When power no longer belonged to certain people, the intensity of the competition would stimulate everyone to constantly work hard. Otherwise, they would face the danger of being eliminated. When the sounds of studying entered their ears, many of the southern Ming Empire's officials looked pensive. They had a feeling that if they allowed Wuxia to continue developing, it wouldn't be a problem for them to replace the southern Ming dynasty. Not only the school, but after walking around the factories, they realized that Wuxia was already so powerful. A complete light industry was developing into a heavy industry. With self-sufficiency, they no longer needed to rely on others and could still live well. This was also why Wuxia was so confident. It could be imagined that as time passed, Wuxia's workshop, lathe and programming would pull further and further away from the primitive southern Ming. In the end, the strength of both sides would not be on the same level. In the end, it would be normal for the southern Ming to become Wuxia's subordinate. The more they understood, the more they felt, and the greater the pressure on them. This trip to Crimson City was like opening a new window, making all the officials in the observer group feel great pressure. Everyone knew that the stronger Wuxia was, the more danger the southern Ming dynasty would be in. Their status and safety would be more and more uncertain. After all, no one wanted to see a powerful neighboring country appear. As they understood more, the use of the Yang family's department store and the Yang coins were also displayed in front of all the officials. When they were attracted by the dazzling array of items, they realized that the Yang coins in their hands had been taken away by their family members. Some of them had even been used to buy goods. Especially when a few brand new bicycles appeared in front of the Yang family's hotel, these officials were shocked and angry. The horizons of the officials were naturally different from those of their family members. Although the bicycles were novel, they weren't enough to attract them. On the contrary, things like flashlights, sewing machines, watches, and binoculars were more attractive. In the eyes of these officials, flashlights were high-tech products. They were very practical, whether it was for civilian or military use, they were good things. They hoped to learn from, understand, and imitate them. Needless to say, sewing machines could increase the production of the textile industry and clothes. It was undoubtedly a great contribution to the progress of society. Watches could accurately tell the time. It was convenient and also a symbol of status. Binoculars were even more useful when used in the military. Although the binoculars sold in the Yang family's department store were a bit low magnification and were far inferior to those of the five-star army, in the eyes of the country bumpkins, it was already very powerful. There were many ideas, but without the Yang coins, everything was useless. It was just that the family members had already spent all of it. Everything could no longer be recovered. Then another problem appeared. How could they obtain the Yang coins? After asking around, they found out that only officials had the opportunity to obtain Yang coins. They would be given a certain amount of Yang coins in their monthly salary. Yang coins couldn't be bought with silver. It was one of the most valuable currencies. Using the opportunity to inquire about the Yang coins, the salary system of Wuxia officials appeared in front of the southern Ming officials. As they understood more, they couldn't help but sigh. As a Wuxia official, the salary was really high. Some people even calculated carefully. As a Wuxia official, their salary was actually 50 times that of a southern Ming official. Although the Yangxia was very strict with the corruption of officials, there was basically no gray income. However, if one could live a good life just by relying on their salary, who would be willing to stretch their hands everywhere, cause countless troubles and be impeached all the time? Through the Yang coins, everyone had a better understanding of the Yangxia officials' salary system. This was the main reason why Yang Chendong gave them the Yang coins. As for some of the goods being bought by the Yangxia, Bugnam of Gojoseon didn't care. After all, it wouldn't be long before the southern Ming Empire became a part of the Yangxia. So what if those things were passed on? Not only did the officials understand the origin and use of the Yang coins, but the family members also had a deeper understanding. Some people couldn't help but sigh. If I could become a Yangxia official, it would be a very happy thing. It was just a sigh. However, when the officials heard this sigh, they would be lying if they said that they weren't moved at all. Many people even started to consider whether it was possible to become a Yangxia official from the southern Ming Empire. It was also at this time that Yu Qian and Xin Yu received Yang Chendong's instructions and unintentionally mentioned the 9 cabinet elders during the banquet. They specifically mentioned that there were only 5 cabinet elders. The remaining 4 spots were reserved for southern Ming and Baiming officials. These people might be a bit bureaucratic, but it was undeniable that they had a lot of experience as an official. This was something that the new Yangxia officials couldn't compare to. When faced with a problem, experienced officials would often have a very gentle way to solve it. This was something that could be learned and used as a reference. The cabinet elder's empty spot was right there. They couldn't help but think about it. All of a sudden, a few officials became excited. However, they had been officials for many years and had seen and heard too many things. On the surface, they didn't show any abnormalities. However, once this kind of impatience appeared in their hearts, they couldn't suppress it. At this point, the various thoughts and opinions that needed to be forced onto the observer group were basically completed. At this time, the southern Ming Emperor Zhu Qizhen sent someone to deliver a decree to the Yang family hotel. It was to summon the observer group back to the southern Ming Empire. Once the decree was issued, although there was still a month before the observer group was allowed to stay in Crimson City for 2 months, everyone had to go back. No matter how much they loved Crimson City, they were still officials of the southern Ming Empire. Yang Chendong naturally knew about Emperor Ying's decree. Looks like someone can't hold it in. After laughing, Yang Chendong looked at Yu Qian and Xin Yu who came to report, "The 2 of you will be busy for a while. It is our wish to serve the king." Yu Qian and Xin Yu stood up and bowed. After the decree was issued, the observer group was only given 3 days to prepare. Some of the family members were naturally a bit noisy. Clearly they hadn't played enough. Or rather, there were still many places in Crimson City that they hadn't been to. They couldn't help but complain that the emperor was a bit unreasonable. As such, the officials were all trying their best to persuade them. At this time, Yu Qian and Xin Yu appeared in the Yang family hotel. Then the observer group officials were called away by them. They said it was to send them off, but everyone knew that there must be something to talk about. Not only were the ordinary officials of the observation group called away, but even high-ranking officials like Chen Sun and Wang Zuo were also invited to the palace by the Black Knights. Seeing the Black Cavalry eyeing them covetously, they were really worried that if they dared to refuse, what kind of serious consequences would there be? Just like that, 3 whole days passed. Not only did Yang Chendong, Yu Qian and Xin Yu act, but even the other 3 elders Luan Shaochen, Wu Qian and Long Tainan appeared in the Yang family hotel and invited the officials to a meal. All of a sudden, almost all of the officials who had reached the 4th rank and above were invited to the banquet. As for the content of the conversation, it was up to each person to decide. In reality, what Yang Chendong and the others talked about with the southern Ming Empire officials wasn't a big matter. Sometimes it was just a small talk. For some officials, they didn't even make a wish to become an official. But was what they talked about that important? Chapter 1643. What was important was that they had talked about it. As long as the officials were talked about, they would be suspected when they returned to the southern Ming dynasty. It would be even more difficult for them to be put in an important position. How could Chen Sun and Wang Zuo not see the reason behind this? However, they had no other choice. In the territory of Chichen City, they did not dare to go against Yang Chendong's good intentions. Moreover, they also needed to find a way out for themselves. Although being able to go to the meeting did not mean that they would definitely join the Yangxia, at least they would not offend Bugnam of Gojoseon. Moreover, so many officials did not refuse, so why would they refuse? Wasn't this the same as digging their own graves? No one with political wisdom would do such a foolish thing. In the same small courtyard, Yang Lu was listening to Yang Ying's report. He was talking about the officials of the Southern Ming Dynasty's observation group being talked about. Master, as of now, all the officials of rank 4 and above in the observation group have been talked about. Yang Qindong has used almost all the officials of the City Lord's mansion and has already started to talk about the rank 5 officials. When Yang Ying said this, his face revealed an expression of admiration. At this moment, Yang Lu's face was also filled with admiration. He naturally saw through Yang Qindong's intentions. It was because of this that he could not help but say with admiration, "Amazing, my young master really has good methods." Presumably, Emperor Yingzong will have a headache and will not dare to put these people in important positions. This is equivalent to cutting off one of his own arms before the battle. Yang Ying also nodded and said, "That's right. If they don't dare to trust these people, then in a certain period of time, Yingzong will have no one to use. It is very likely that there will be internal chaos in the Southern Ming dynasty." "No. It is not a possibility but a certainty," Yang Lu said with a very firm tone. Then his tone changed. "However, this has nothing to do with us. It is even a good thing. What we want is to take the chestnuts out of the chaos. Right? How are the arrangements on Yang Yang's side?" "Everything is arranged properly. The poor and stupid him does not know that he is being used by us." Speaking of this matter, Yang Ying's face was filled with pride. This time, there were embroidered uniform guards among the members of the Southern Ming observation group. This was one of the methods the great Ming Emperor used to monitor his subjects. One of the commanders named Wenjing had another mission, which was to contact Yang Yang and create a false impression that Chao Jixiang wanted to join Bugnam of Gojoseon to lure him in. Hearing Yang Ying say that the plan was going well, Yang Lu's expression became better. "Good, haha, if that's the case we have to be prepared. Remember, this time we can only succeed and not fail. Otherwise we will die without a burial ground." Yang Ying replied with a straight face, "Master, please rest assured. We have prepared for this for a long time. There will definitely be no problems." "Alright, let's wait and see," Yang Lu said with a face full of excitement. Then he muttered to himself in a voice that no one else could hear, "I hope you can cooperate. Like this, as a master and servant, I can still spare your life. Otherwise, I can only force you to be ruthless." Crimson City Pier. This day was very lively. The 13,000 people of the Southern Ming observation group were queuing up to board the ship. Compared to the excitement they had when they came, most of them were reluctant to leave. They could eat well, sleep well, and have so many fun things here. It was really hard for them to give up. Now that they were finally going to leave, they were going to return to their previous lives. For a moment, a sense of disappointment filled everyone's hearts. Yu Qian, Xinyu, and the others also appeared in front of the pier to send everyone off. They were bidding farewell to Qin Sun, Wang Zue, and the others in front of the pier. With a bitter smile on his face, Qin Sun looked at Yu Qian in front of him and didn't know what to say. Thousands of words turned into one sentence. "Yu Qian, you've really screwed this old man over." "Master Qin, don't say that. Can't you see that our Yangxia is already much stronger than the Southern Ming Empire? This is because our king is virtuous. Otherwise, it would be like dealing with other foreign races and other countries. As long as the army moved, would the Southern Ming Empire be able to stop it?" Yu Qian didn't feel that it was too much. Instead, he spoke the truth. During this time, Qin Sun also went to the 5-star Army's barracks. He looked at the equipment and the training process. He also saw the long line of young people signing up. Qin Sun was very envious that so many people in Crimson City volunteered to join the army. It was unlike the Southern Ming Empire, where the army relied on soldiers. When there weren't enough soldiers, they could only go to the various cities to recruit strong men. One was voluntary, the other was forced. The result was obvious. The conclusion was that the Southern Ming Empire was definitely not a match for the 5-star army. Thus, Yu Qian's words were true. However, if Qin Sun joined the Yangxia because of this, he wouldn't be able to get over it. He decided to think about it carefully. He didn't reply to Yu Qian's words and only smiled. On the other side, Xinyu was chatting with Wang Zue and the others. On the surface, it looked like they were enjoying themselves. "Come over when you have time. As long as you are willing, the gates of Crimson City are always open for everyone," Xinyu said with a smile. Wang Zue and the others naturally wouldn't be stupid enough to immediately nod and agree to this obvious solicitation. They could only chuckle and change the topic. Bugnam of Gojoseon has arrived. Just as everyone was waiting to board the ship, a group of majestic cavalry came from not far from the dock. Then Yang Qindong, who was wearing a golden cape, came from afar under the protection of the Black Knight Dragon Guards. "King is here." Yu Qian and Xin Yu immediately straightened their bodies and tidied their clothes before walking over. The other southern Ming officials who hadn't boarded the ship also hurriedly stood in several rows with a respectful appearance. Soon, the cavalry arrived at the pier and Yu Qian took the initiative to say, "King, didn't you say you weren't coming? How could that be? They are the backbone of our Han people. If they want to leave, how can this king not send them off?" Yang Qindong said as he dismounted. Then, accompanied by Yu Qian, Xin Yu and the others, he walked over to the group of southern Ming officials and shook hands with them one by one. During this period of time, everyone was used to this way of greeting and shaking hands, so everyone was very cooperative. There were even some officials who, after shaking hands with Yang Qindong, had their faces flushed red. Needless to say, this was caused by excitement. While shaking hands with everyone, Yang Qindong said loudly, "I believe everyone has seen how happy the Han people are living under the leadership of Yang Xie. And we live in this era. Since we have the conditions, what we should do is to let more Han people live a better life. This can't be done by just relying on the efforts of this king and Yang Xie's officials. We still need everyone's support." Well said, well said. The southern Ming officials nodded in agreement. Using the people's livelihood as an example was indeed something that no one could refute. Seeing that the effect was achieved, Yang Qindong smiled and watched as everyone boarded the ships. Ships appeared one by one and left one by one, slowly sailing out of Crimson City's new pier. On the cruise ship, many members of the observer group were still waving their hands towards the shore, looking reluctant to part with them. Wang Zhiqing and his sister Wang Shang also waved for a while. When they saw that the pier was far away, they casually found a place to rest in the ship's cabin. Then Wang Shang's pleasant voice sounded, "Crimson City is so good. It's 10,000 times better than our capital. I really don't know when we will be able to come back." After sighing, Wang Shang said to herself, "Brother, if grandfather comes to Yang Xie to be an official, do you think we can live here forever?" Wang Zhiqing, who was called by his sister, nodded perfunctorily. "That's right." At this moment he didn't hear what his sister said at all. All of his attention was on the ship's cabin. In the end he still won. He borrowed some money from his friends and sister to buy a bicycle and left it there. This was his biggest gain from this trip. He even began to imagine what kind of commotion he would attract when he rode a bicycle through the streets of the capital, and how many envious gazes would look at him. One of the siblings was talking while the other was thinking about something. They didn't notice that not far from them, two embroidered uniform guards had already secretly recorded everything they said and how they behaved. It was written that Wang Shang had an incomparable love for Crimson City and wanted to persuade her grandfather, Wang Zue, to be an official in Yang Xie. Her brother Wang Zhiqing was also thinking about the feasibility of this and nodded thoughtfully. Strictly speaking, the contents of the records didn't match up, because Wang Zhiqing didn't hear what his sister said at all. However, this wasn't important. What was important was what Emperor Ying would think when he saw these records, what kind of measures he would take, and what kind of commotion Wang Zue and the entire Wang family would face. In front of the pier, the last ship had already left. Yang Qindong sighed and said, "Our actions this time will definitely make Emperor Ying unhappy. I'm afraid these officials will be in danger. How about this, you guys immediately come up with a plan. If there's danger, how to save them. When the time comes, the intelligence department will fully cooperate with you." Yu Qian and Xin Yu, who were called out, also knew that this matter was of great importance. They immediately nodded and said, "Yes, Wang. We'll go back and come up with a plan." "Yes, you must do your best to perfect it. Don't be afraid of spending money. Many of these people have real talent. If they can join Yang Xie, it will be extremely beneficial for us to manage the entire southern Ming dynasty in the future." "Yes, we're clear." Yu Qian and Xin Yu gave their assurances again. Yang Qindong nodded in satisfaction and then left the pier with the Black Cavalry. Chapter 1644. Speaking of the boat, because they had received Emperor Ying's decree, their return speed was clearly faster. They had used close to 15 days to arrive and less than 10 days to return. They had arrived at the docks of the Suzhou prefecture. Once everyone was ashore, they immediately rushed to Yingtian Mansion, the capital of the southern Ming dynasty, Nanjing Mansion. The officials were all smart people. Since they had returned to the southern Ming dynasty, regardless of what had happened to their mentality, what they needed to do now was see the emperor and then express their loyalty. Wang Zhiqing, Wang Shang and the others also got off the boat. However, for some reason they felt that the air they breathed was not as fresh as before. It was to the point that everywhere they looked was not pleasing to the eye. The formerly bustling capital was now like a countryside in their eyes. There were flaws everywhere. In particular, when they entered the capital and saw the occasional rice fields on the sides of the streets, they felt a wave of disgust and discomfort. In comparison, the incomparably clean streets in Crimson City, as well as the public toilets 1,000 meters away, seemed more humane. Zhu Qizhen met the members of the observer group one by one in the imperial palace. When he saw that everyone was extremely respectful when they saw him, for some reason, he did not feel as interested as before. He had a feeling that these people's smiles were too fake, as if they were acting with him. After the officials finished greeting each one of them, Zhu Qizhen finally spoke. "Beloved officials, I presume that you have all gained a lot from this trip to Crimson City. Since this is the case, go back and write a memorial to see if there is anything we can learn or imitate. Then we can also make changes, okay?" "Your Majesty is wise, this official will obey," the officials replied in unison. Then, everyone left the imperial palace and returned home to write memorials. The next morning, in front of Zhu Qizhen's dragon table, there were memorials written by the various officials. Zhu Qizhen looked through them curiously. However, not long after, he angrily threw these memorials to the ground. It had to be said that these memorials talked about many things. For example, the Ministry of Personnel's memorial said that they were going to clean up the officials again. Anyone who was found to be corrupt would be heavily punished. For the sake of governance, officials were not allowed to engage in business. Anyone who took over extra land should also be returned. Anyone who had business in their family should also immediately stop to prevent collusion between officials and business. The Ministry of Revenue reported that they were going to reinstitute the business tax and collect heavy taxes. Regardless of whether one was a grand scholar, high scholar, or elementary scholar, they would still have to pay taxes when doing business. Everyone was equal. Only then would the wealth of the country be abundant. Only then would they be able to do what they wanted to do and benefit the people. The Ministry of Rights Memorial said that they wanted to set up a Nanming newspaper to allow the common people to have a voice. This way they could eliminate the existence of any undesirable things to the greatest extent. He also wanted to set up public schools, with the imperial court providing money so that the commoners could have books to study and develop their wisdom. The Ministry of Justice's memorial said that they wanted to expand the dungeon and severely crack down on the outlaws among the people, especially those officials with backgrounds, so that everyone would be equal. Only by giving the common people peace and order would the common people feel safe and happy. Only then would the common people truly support the southern Ming dynasty. The Ministry of Works said that they wanted to open more factories. At the same time, they wanted to raise the social status of blacksmiths, carpenters, and craftsmen. Only then would they be able to better display their enthusiasm and build the southern Ming dynasty. Even the imperial censor of the left, Shang Lu, wrote a memorial saying that they wanted to clean up the governance of officials and reduce unnecessary expenses for the imperial court. For example, they wanted to reduce the expenses of the embroidered uniform guard, expand the area of the streets, build more public toilets, and let the common people develop the good habit of not urinating and defecating everywhere. They wanted to change the environment of the entire southern Ming dynasty so that everyone would not have to live in a stinky environment. They could also reduce the occurrence of diseases and so on. Looking at these memorials, if they were not asking for money, they were asking for people, or they were criticizing the southern Ming dynasty system and bad habits. How could Zhu Qizhen not be angry? It was rare for him to throw a tantrum in the main hall for several hours. His shouts could be heard from time to time from the throne room. Setting up a business tax and taking back the privileges of scholars. What does Qin Sun and the Ministry of Appointments want to do? Do they want us to become enemies with all the scholars in the world and cause chaos without a war? Set up a newspaper when school starts? What does the Ministry of Rights want to do? Could it be that if we don't set up a newspaper we won't be able to hear the voices of the common people? Expand the dungeon? What does the Ministry of Justice want to do? Do we have so many bad people in the southern Ming dynasty? What bright heaven and earth! Could it be that the skies of the southern Ming dynasty are dark and gloomy? The Ministry of Works is even more ridiculous. Raising the status of the craftsmen, are they trying to change the current state of the southern Ming dynasty? Won't this cause chaos? If the status of the craftsmen is raised, will the status of other people be raised as well? Especially this imperial censor. According to what he said, are we living in a stinky environment every day? The common people will get sick when they eat grains. This is originally a matter of heaven and earth. How can it be that the common people's production has anything to do with our current environment? After calling out the names of the various departments, Zhu Qizhen overturned the dragon case in a fit of anger. The eunuchs at the side were so scared that they trembled in fear, not daring to say a word. Are they rebelling? All of them are pointing fingers at me. I think they have clearly been bribed by Yang Qindong. We don't believe that Crimson City is really as good as they say. How is this observing and learning? This is clearly eating other people's food and then coming back to bite their master. These people all deserve to be killed, they deserve to be killed. Zhu Qizhen couldn't be blamed for being so angry. He had his subordinates give their opinions because he wanted to see if they had any gains. If there was, he could make appropriate changes without putting in too much effort. But now, how was this appropriate change? It was clearly overturning everything. The southern Ming dynasty was also degraded by everyone. As the emperor, he naturally had no face. It would be strange if he wasn't angry. After venting his anger, Zhu Qizhen stood there panting. The head eunuch Qian Sengbao finally found an opportunity and hurriedly knelt on the ground. Your Majesty, don't be too angry. Your health is more important. It's not worth it for these officials. Yes, it's not worth it, Zhu Qizhen said in a fit of pique. Then he said, go, summon beloved official Chao to see us. The so-called beloved official Chao was the guard of the embroidered uniform guard, Chao Jixiang. The kneeling Qian Sengbao naturally didn't get along with him, but this was the emperor's order. He didn't dare to stop him. He hurriedly gave a look to the eunuch at the side. At this moment, Qian Sengbao was secretly delighted. He was thinking that the emperor had nowhere to vent his anger. Perhaps Chao Jixiang came at this time to eat melons. Chao Jixiang, who was on duty in the palace, was quickly found. He came to the throne room and knelt down. You all can leave first. Great companion, you can also leave. He glanced at Qian Sengbao. Because of the appearance of Yang Qindong, this little butterfly, Zhu Qizhen didn't experience being captured by Yes Hen. Thus, Chao Jixiang didn't appear to save his master. Now, his great companion became Qian Sengbao's eunuch. The emperor summoned Qian Sengbao and wanted to drive him away. Qian Sengbao naturally wasn't happy. But at this moment he didn't dare to disobey the emperor's order. He could only agree and leave. After he walked out of the throne room, he stood there in deep thought. Recently, every time Zhu Qizhen saw Chao Jixiang, he was always mysterious. Even his great companion was on guard against him. This made him feel a sense of danger. If Chao Jixiang really replaced him, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to have a good ending. Internal strife among eunuchs was often the fiercest. Those in power could get whatever they wanted. As for those who were stepped on, it was a fate worse than death. Eunuch Qian, why are you here? Why aren't you serving the emperor? Qian Sengbao, who was in deep thought, was surprised when a voice came from behind him. He looked in the direction of the voice and saw the head eunuch of the empress, Mao Mu. Although they were both head eunuchs, one served the empress while the other served the emperor. The difference in status was too great. Oh, so it's eunuch Mao. What's wrong? Are you leaving the palace? Yes, the empress wants to weave cloth. Aren't I going out to choose? Mao Mu said with a fawning expression. In the entire southern Ming eunuch group, although Mao Mu carried the identity of a head eunuch, his real power wasn't even in the top 10. This was all because the empress's temper was very good and she never cared about matters. The master was weak, so as the eunuch by the master's side, he naturally didn't have much power. But because of this, Mao Mu became a transcendent existence in the entire group of eunuchs. This person did not fight for fame or profit. Because of the empress, not many people were interested in his position. This made it seem that he had a good relationship with all the eunuchs, and they all seemed to be good. In terms of status, Mao Mu was far from them. But Qian Sengbao was a very smart person. He definitely wouldn't casually offend people for no reason. So when he saw Mao Mu ask him, he chuckled and explained, it's like this. The emperor wants to meet Chao Changwei alone, so I came out to get some fresh air. Oh, so it's like that. It's just that Chao Changwei's thoughts are very big. It's not a good thing for such an ambitious person to always be by the emperor's side. After Mao Mu heard this, he first had a shocked expression on his face. Then he seemed to say this very casually. Just as he finished speaking, Mao Mu quickly covered his mouth with his right hand with an embarrassed expression. Between eunuchs, unless there was a life and death feud, they wouldn't speak ill of each other in front of each other. That was the behavior of a vile person and it was shameful. Normally if Mao Mu said this, Qian Sengbao would even reprimand him. After all, he was now the head of the group of eunuchs. He had the obligation to maintain the unity of the group of eunuchs, at least on the surface. Chapter 1645. But now that he was angry, Mao Mu's words hit the bottom of his heart. He said with an angry face, that's right, I thought I was the only one who thought Chao Changwei was ambitious. I didn't expect that Mao Gonggong also thought so. Then I really have to be careful. Ah, Qin Gonggong, you are busy. I still have to go out of the palace. I will talk to Chen Gonggong when I have the chance. Mao Mu didn't say anything this time. Some words were enough to be said once. Saying too much would have the opposite effect. Mao Mu left like this. Along the way, he took the token given by the empress and walked out of the palace with the 6 little eunuchs. Then he walked into the market and looked around. He went to a few shops but didn't buy any suitable cloth. During this process, no one noticed that while he was chatting with someone in a cloth shop, he had spread the news of Zhu Qizhen's rage in summoning Chao Jixiang. In the entire Yangxia, there were no more than 10 people who knew that Mao Mu was Yang Hodong's spy. Among them, there was an intelligence team that was responsible for contacting him. Wang Shan, the head of the telecommunications department, was the one who knew about it. He was the one who reported everything directly to Yang Qindong. Even the head of the security bureau Yang San didn't know. Because of this, Mao Mu's safety was guaranteed. Even if Chao Jixiang had joined forces with the Yangxia traitor, he still didn't know that Mao Mu was Yangxia's spy. When Mao Mu reported some of the news in the palace, Zhu Qizhen was listening to Chao Jixiang's report with a serious expression. Your Majesty, the matter is like this. I have already contacted that person. He will lead Bugnam of Gojoseon to the ship. When the time comes, we will choose to take action at sea. At that time, no matter how great his ability is, he won't be able to escape. And good. That's right, didn't you say there was a backup plan? Zhu Qizhen asked with interest. Yes, Your Majesty. I don't know if you still remember Shaohua Province's President Kuroda, who is the Navy General of Shaohua Province. When the Shaohua Province was destroyed by Yangxia, he had escaped with 100,000 soldiers. Over the years, although his strength has weakened, he still has 50,000 Navy elites in his hands. When the time comes, they will also appear and join us to kill Bugnam of Gojoseon. However, he also made a request. That was, if he wanted to reclaim the entire Shaohua province, he needed the emperor to acknowledge their existence. There is also that Yang Lu. He wants to inherit the throne after Bugnam of Gojoseon's death, but he said that he will definitely obey the emperor's management. Once he stabilizes his position, he is also willing to send troops to attack Ming and help the emperor unify the world. As soon as Chao Jixiang opened his mouth, he laid out all the plans and the requests of the so-called allies. Hearing this, Zhu Qizhen frowned. After hesitating for about half an hour, Zhu Qizhen opened his mouth. We can agree to President Kuroda's request. Originally, we didn't need to pay too much attention to a small island country. But Yang Lu's request. Chao Jixiang was the best at reading people's expressions. When he saw Zhu Qizhen's expression, he guessed something. He immediately said, Emperor, please rest assured. We can agree to his request first. After he stabilizes Yangxia and helps us deal with Ming, we can find an opportunity to kill him. Yes, that's what I mean. Bugnam of Gojoseon's appearance has already caused chaos in the great Ming dynasty for so long. If he dies, there can't be any more chaos. We can't fall for the same thing twice. Zhu Qizhen said with a satisfied expression. Just like that, the two of them, Zhu Qizhen and Chao Jixiang, began to perfect the plan. This conversation lasted for nearly 4 hours. In the end, Zhu Qizhen ordered someone to bring in the meal and even rewarded Chao Jixiang to eat with him. This made Chen Senbao, who was waiting outside, very envious. At this time he felt that his position was in danger, but he didn't have any better ideas. Because he didn't know what Chao Jixiang was doing next. In the palace of Qian City, the telecommunications director Wang Shan brought the telegram sent by Mao Mu to Yang Qindong. After reading the contents of the telegram, Yang Qindong thoughtfully asked, Did you bring the copy of the telegram from Director Yang San? Yes. Wang Shan also sent the copy of the telegram that he had prepared in advance to Yang Qindong. After staying by Yang Qindong's side for so many years, Wang Shan was also used to the way the young master worked. Therefore, he would send a copy of the telegram that was related to reporting to him. After receiving the telegram from Yang Qindong 2 days ago, Yang Qindong carefully read it again. Then he put his right hand on the table and tapped it thoughtfully. He seemed to be thinking about something. After about the time it took to drink a cup of tea, he asked, Did you find anything from the phone that I asked you to monitor? No, that phone is rarely used. Presumably, he also knows that some things are not safe to communicate through the phone. Wang Shan replied in a deep voice. Well, he's grown up. He's so careful when doing things, but unfortunately he didn't use it properly. Since he chose this path of no return, he can't blame anyone for everything. Okay, Wang Shan, go back. Remember, don't tell anyone about what happened today, not even Beta Persei. In the entire Yangxia, Yang Qindong trusted Tiger's Mane the most. followed by a few of his servants and then Wang Shan. After all, as the head of the telecommunications department, he had access to core secrets. Therefore, although he was only a department head, Wang Shan's position in the entire Yang faction was extremely high. Very few people would not give him face. Wang Shan himself also understood that he could be where he was today all thanks to Yang Qindong. He only needed to do things well and his status would be stable. He nodded heavily. "Young master, please rest assured that no one else will know about this." Wang Shan was able to address Yang Qindong as the young master, just like the servants. This showed how much Wang Shan was valued. Wang Shan took his leave, leaving Yang Qindong alone in the palace study. He sighed. Some things did develop beyond his expectations. He had thought that someone would betray him. After all, when one's status was high and one's vision was broadened, one would have the motivation and ideas to move up. However, when something really happened and the person who betrayed him was someone he trusted very much, Yang Qindong still felt very uncomfortable. He did not know how long he had been sitting there. All kinds of memories and pasts between Yang Qindong and Yang Lu flashed through his mind. It was not until Hu Yan appeared in the study and brought a bowl of lotus seed soup in front of him that Yang Qindong came back to his senses. He smiled apologetically. "Look, I made you worry again. No, I just wanted to see you. Don't think too much about it. We've already gotten enough. Even if we stop now, we won't have any regrets." Hu Yan walked behind Yang Qindong with a smile and gently massaged his shoulders. Feeling the care and gentleness, Yang Qindong reached out and patted Hu Yan's arm. "Good, optimistic spirit. Take it easy, take it easy." Ah. At this moment, Yang Qindong's mood seemed to be much better. In contrast, Yang Lu outside the small courtyard of the palace was very proud. As he expected, although when Jing had gone back, he had already convinced Yang. If the plan went smoothly, there should be a result soon. And he just needed to push the boat along. "Yang, you can go and do that thing now. This little one understands." Yang nodded in agreement, then turned and left. On the surface, after the southern Ming kingdom's observation team left, Qichen City became stable again. But in fact, there was an undercurrent surging, and a conspiracy was shrouding Yang Qindong's head. 2 days later, Yang went straight to the palace. His face was full of joy, as if he had done something great. On the same day, Beta Persei's mother-in-law, Badama, suddenly entered Yangxia First Hospital because of a serious illness. As the son-in-law, Beta Persei naturally had to perform well. He had already applied for 10 days of leave from Yang Qindong to serve his mother-in-law. In the palace, Yang Qindong saw Yang Qindong and said, "Fourth brother, it's done. I have already discussed with the commander of the southern Ming brocade guards, Wen Jing. As long as you, Bugnam of Gojoseon, are willing to admit it personally to the other party, and Chao Jixiang is willing to submit to Yangxia, he will bring all the brocade guards. Anyway, at that time they will control the southern Ming palace. As long as my army arrives, we can take over the entire southern Ming kingdom with the smallest price." Looking at Yang Qindong's happy expression, Yang Qindong smiled. "Fourth brother, how did you discuss it?" "Oh, it's like this." Yang Qindong explained the plan that they had discussed. After an hour, Yang Qindong understood everything. After hesitating for a moment, he said, "Okay, this prince agrees. I will meet with Chao Jixiang outside the Wenzhou port. At that time, this prince will personally promise that as long as Chao Jixiang is willing to help me, Yang Xie, not only will he not be punished, he will also be rewarded greatly." Yang Qindong was very happy when he saw that Yang Qindong had agreed. "That's great. However, fourth brother, you must remember that in order to prevent the news from leaking out, you must not bring too many troops. It will not be good if the news is leaked." "Is this fourth brother's idea or their idea?" Yang Qindong asked after hearing this. However, his heart was beating very fast because if this was his fourth brother's idea, then he could not help but suspect whether Yang was also involved. Fortunately, Yang quickly gave the answer. "Of course it is Chao Jixiang's idea. He is afraid that the news will be leaked. When that time comes, Ingzong will be prepared and he will not be able to complete his mission of controlling the imperial palace. Of course, with fourth brother's current status, even if he cannot bring too many people, he will still be accompanied by the black cavalry. After all, one must always be vigilant." Hearing Yang Qindong say this, Yang Qindong was finally able to relax. He nodded and said, "Okay, fourth brother. I understand the matter and I also agree. Next, you all can set a time together. When there is an accurate time, just inform sixth brother." You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.